This guy has serious hidden power, yet everyone still treats him like absolute trash. He was born into a legendary noble house, only to be branded a total disappointment. Simply forgotten by everyone, but that is about to change. Pretty soon they will all regret ignoring him. Oscar's weak mana was never his fault. A potion meant to quietly boost his power had actually been poisoned from the start. It locked his mana deep inside, testing the remaining fluid just one more time. Oscar figures out the truth immediately. It is glaringly obvious someone tried to murder him. He was a target, and now he is coming to collect that blood debt. Inside a private mansion, a panicked thug warns his boss about the young mage. He showed up demanding to know who sold that rare potion, and when they refused, completely tearing the shop to shreds. Plus, the kid was wearing a white tower ring. A master mage's ring, and just like that, both men freeze in absolute terror. Oscar is standing right there, perched on the windowsill. The boss screams to kill him. But the young man's eyes stay utterly frozen, zero fear, then one quick wind blade. And a guard's head is rolling across the floor. The boss completely loses his mind. He panics and pulls a gun, the ultimate weapon of the week. Oscar just stops the bullet. It hangs suspended in midair. Oscar looks almost bored, wondering what kind of magic this is. No mana signature whatsoever, just basic metal magic. He casually flicks the bullet right back, sending it right back to drop him instantly. Turns out the boss was not even a real mage. Oscar only wants one thing right now, a name. Who ordered the poison? The bleeding man hesitates, so Oscar looks down with a cold, terrifying stare and asks if a piece of trash's pride is truly worth more than his life. After a brutal lesson in pain and a heavy taste of Oscar's boot, the broken man finally squeals. A mysterious hooded figure paid them a fortune. Made it simple, refuse and die. This hooded stranger wore a white tower ring. Just like our main character, the only other clue the boss caught was a highly distinct scent, fresh mint. But how did our hero even get this powerful? And why did he fall for such a basic poison trap in the first place? Well, 20 years ago, this very same man was the greatest Archmage alive. He stood alone against the single most terrifying threat in existence. The High Priest of Demons, a war that nearly wiped humanity off the map. Fighting completely by himself, shoulder to shoulder with no one. He won, yet that victory demanded a terrible price. His tower burned to ashes. 200 master mages lay dead beside him. He was dying, bleeding out alone. Among the bodies of the only friends he ever had, unsure if their sacrifice was worth it. He closed his eyes in that field of blood, believing everything was truly finished. The legendary Archmage had breathed his last, his story apparently at an end. But fate was not done. 20 years later, his eyes suddenly snap wide open. A heart that stopped beating decades ago is suddenly pumping warm blood once more. Looking at his reflection in a mirror, he gasps at the unfamiliar young face. He is trapped inside the body of a completely broke young noble, mocked as a complete disgrace by his relatives and labeled the weakest magic user. In the entire tower, nobody respected him, but this time is different. He will not repeat those fatal mistakes, no more sacrificing his allies. This time he will protect everyone, no matter what it takes. Who actually matter. This time, he is living purely for himself and whoever he chooses to protect, even if that makes him the villain. Back in the present, Oscar uncovers a brutal truth. The man frantically searches through papers inside a drawer. He hands the documents over, muttering that everything relevant is right there. Oscar starts skimming the pages, looking at the recent reports on the White Tower. April 28th is celebrated as the Day of the White Knight due to Oscar's ultimate sacrifice, but the tower never recovered afterward anyway. The files state that a massive announcement is scheduled for that symbolic day, and some experts speculate the tower's main issue is a lack of advanced magic, but Oscar remembers leaving Edna specific notes to prevent exactly this from happening. To make matters worse, the White Tower has the lowest revenue of them all. Meanwhile, the Yellow Tower of the East dominates electricity, ushering in a new era of magical engineering. The Blue Tower runs agriculture and potion production alongside drinking water. Finally, the Red Tower deals directly with military defense with its devastating attack spells. But what on earth happened to the White Tower? Yes, really. The boss replies that they now run simple deliveries. Oscar is left utterly speechless. His hands begin to tremble with rage as the man brags that they hold an edge by offering fast, secure courier services. In that exact moment, reality hits Oscar hard. the proud mages who once soared high and ruled the skies were once the ultimate symbol of absolute freedom, even. Compared to legendary dragons, Oscar demands to know who approved this, and the boss reveals. It was the current master of the White Tower. Oscar's expression changes. Completely realizing his own students did this, he shifts to the water. In agricultural sectors, since potions used to be a mage's primary source of profit, but the boss explains everything has changed now that the Blue Tower holds a virtual monopoly. Oscar internally notes that back in his day, that crown belonged to them. The boss keeps talking, explaining how drinking water, sales and artificial rain in dry regions keep their pockets lined. Oscar cannot wrap his head around purchasing clean water. To him, it seems like a cheap trick for fast cash, especially since anyone can drink straight from a well. Still, his tower cannot hope to compete with the rivals, leaving the upcoming festival as his sole chance to turn the tables. The man begs for mercy, but Oscar quietly wonders if the guy has already lost too much blood. He seriously considers sparing him because of the valuable info, until he opens a nearby notebook and uncovers a list of horrific, unforgivable crimes, and honestly, he is done. Turns his back, calling the pathetic man absolute trash before silently leaving the scene. Oscar mutters to himself that perhaps the guy will find better luck in his next life. The very next morning, back at the White Tower, Oscar collapses into his room as heavy exhaustion takes its toll. He cannot believe he is this drained after casting only simple spells, and needs to figure out what is wrong. With this weak body, he wonders if he can even summon his signature magic, the spell that made him the absolute greatest mage in history, the Wind Archive. But the spell fades away almost instantly, proving he is still far too weak to fully analyze this vessel. He decides to run a deep magical scan. While the scan is running, he takes a moment to read up on the history of this body's original owner. Oscar, his memories are still a jumbled mess, and he needs to piece things together quickly. Only then can he save this body. He opens a book detailing the life of Oscar Crushen, the heir of a count. Apparently, he was the only survivor of a tragic mansion fire. Even before the tragedy, the Magic Towers recognized his talent and fought to recruit him. Throughout his 6 years at the academy, he dominated the rankings with absolute ease. He got perfect grades and even published an elite thesis that shocked everyone. It proved he was a prodigy, but then why was this genius stuck at level 1? The book reveals the harsh, crushing truth. The boy suffered from a rare mana deficiency. This brutal condition permanently blocked him from becoming the greatest mage of his generation. Oscar is absolutely stunned by this discovery. If this is true, his pathetic level actually makes sense. He possesses the mind of a master, but his physical shell simply cannot channel mana. Right then, his magical diagnostic scan finishes. A glowing status window materializes before his eyes. Looking at the data, Oscar realizes something is very wrong. This is no natural illness. Someone deliberately locked his magic circuits. This fake syndrome was designed to keep him crippled. It stops a mage from ever gathering or circulating energy, keeping them permanently weak. They can never climb past level 3, but Oscar's body is completely different. His mana circuit is physically healthy. There is no defect, just a deliberate, malicious seal. If the original Oscar Crushen was a genius, he would have easily seen through this lie. Knowing he was being sabotaged, Oscar starts pulling more books off the shelves. He hopes to find a hidden journal or some secret records left behind. Frank claimed the former host was just a useless drunk, but maybe that was a facade. Perhaps it was a clever disguise to hide the fact that he knew he was marked for death. Acting like a fool was his only shield, and if that is the case, things fall into place. It explains why he desperately risked drinking that illegal elixir to break his chains. With no one to trust, he tried to free himself alone, but now Oscar is here. He has the ultimate knowledge to unravel this seal. Suddenly, a strange book catches his eye. It is resting on the table, titled The Reinterpretation of Basic Magic. Oscar opens the cover and flips through the pages. Immediately, his breath catches. The book is heavily annotated. Page after page contains brilliant theories on optimizing wind spells. It is pure magic theory. Oscar realizes these notes are incredibly advanced and efficient. The concept behind this defensive wind shield matches his own personal magic philosophy. It breaks the rigid dogma that defensive spells can only protect, unlocking offensive potential. The previous host designed entirely new ways to cast and even invented novel basic spells. Though his sealed body could not cast them, he perfected everything through mental simulations. They truly shared the same brilliant mind. No wonder the Academy called this kid a prodigy. They think exactly alike when it comes to the core laws of magic. Even with a sealed circuit, the original Oscar never once gave up on his dream. The last page is signed, a lonely mage trying to overcome his ultimate trial. Deep down, he knew his fate, yet he chose to fight the darkness completely alone. Standing up, he softly whispers the name of this fallen prodigy, Oscar Crushen. He was a young mage who silently defied his cursed fate until his very last breath. Settling onto the sofa, a cold determination settles over the legendary Archmage. In the name of Oscar Sage, the 17th master of the Magic Tower, he makes a vow. He will shatter the seal. Instantly, sharp wind energy begins swirling in his chest. The bastards who broke this boy's wings are about to pay the ultimate price. Later, he suddenly wakes up in a lush greenhouse. Oscar wanders around, deeply confused. He has no idea how he got here. His last memory was collapsing from sheer exhaustion. He collapsed while studying how to untie that stubborn knot. Suddenly, a voice calls out. The voice calls him master. He spins around to see his 3 loyal disciples waiting. They are there. The truth hits him instantly. It is the dream curse. The Viscount of Nightmares branded his soul with it. Now, sleep always drags him back. Every night he is forced to relive his past. He hoped a new body would end it. But get this, the nightmare curse is tied to his soul, completely ignoring the body. He still considers himself lucky, though. At least the dreams of his students remain completely intact. With a warm smile, Oscar announces class is finally starting. Magic might seem identical on the surface, but it actually has 4 distinct categories. For instance, the White Tower represents balance. Shasha curiously asks if everyone has a preference. Oscar shakes his head, explaining these are actually innate, unchangeable traits. The Golden Tower pursues speed, while the Red Tower masters destructive fire magic. Meanwhile, Blue and White both focus on balance. Right away, Gilead eagerly demands acceleration magic. Oscar shuts that down fast. It is not a choice, you are born with your type. Luckily, testing their affinity is incredibly easy. He instructs Shasha to channel her magic. The young girl hesitates, warning him that since it is her first try, it might take a while. But the very next second, bright blue mana instantly begins to gather at her fingertips. Oscar confirms she belongs to the balance type, just like him. Shasha beams with absolute joy. She loves the result. Gilead steps up next, and Oscar identifies his type as acceleration. Finally, he calls Lloyd over, but a delicate glowing flower suddenly blooms from the boy's hand. This reveals he is a special type, and trust me, those are insanely rare. Lloyd immediately asks if he can switch, but Oscar says there is no need. But the boy stubbornly demands balance magic. Oscar quickly tries to reason with the kid. He offers a bribe, promising him the most private tutoring sessions possible. He even agrees to research a method to alter his type down the road. Lloyd looks at him, asking if he is serious. Oscar nods, confirming every word. Special mages are incredibly tough to train properly. Hearing this, the boy finally gives in. He agrees on one condition: those extra lessons must happen. Watching this memory, present-day Oscar chuckles. He remembers what a massive brat Lloyd was. Back then, they called him the Promised Man. No matter how hard he tried to act mature, deep down, he was still just a kid. Pure nostalgia, but a sudden broadcast from the radio in the corner breaks his train of thought. It is an official announcement directing Oscar Crushen to report immediately. He needs to head straight to Laboratory 4202. Walking down the hallway, he reflects. He still has 8 physical circuits, but things are starting to change. Gaining 2 mana lines pushed him up to level 2. It is honestly pretty ironic. Feeling genuinely thrilled about reaching level 2 is hilarious. Arriving at the lab, Maxim welcomes him. The elder notes his memory is recovering nicely. Oscar nods, confirming the steady progress. Maxim Bisk, now a powerful tower elder, used to be Oscar's literal junior back then. Though he joined way later, his rise to elder was incredibly swift. He was deeply dedicated, no wonder. Years ago, he followed Oscar everywhere. He constantly called him senior, eventually calling him the tower master. Oscar remembers how hard he worked to perfect his craft. Suddenly, Maxim interrupts. He asks what is so funny, before revealing he just received a serious report. The Gordon family and their leader are both dead. Maxim asks if Oscar has anything to say about this. Oscar calmly shakes his head, claiming their deaths were likely for a pretty good reason. He explains they died simply because they Tried to take his life first. Oscar hands over a small notebook, revealing the elixir was poison. This was just the price for their betrayal. Inside the notebook, he wrote that he only wanted to speak with them, but they attacked him again. Maxim notices a record of some highly suspicious back alley funding listed there. The journal also details a shady mercenary contract, prompting Maxim to quickly rule the entire incident as self-defense. Oscar offers his thanks, quickly seizing the chance to request a small favor. He wants an audience with the Magic Tower Master, and Maxim nods, saying that is easy enough since they regularly talk shop, but at best, Oscar will have to wait 6 whole months. Oscar is immediately confused by this, since that meeting would happen after the big festival starts. Maxim explains she left on an urgent business trip to handle some high-priority commission. Oscar finds that rather strange for a tower master to handle such a chore personally. Still, he drops it, accepting the simple reality that she is gone. The commission must be incredibly crucial, he thinks, leaving him pretty curious to wonder about her actual magic level. He learns she is level 7. Oscar recalls that at her age he was already a level 9 power, thinking she should easily be at least level 8. By now, Maxim casually shifts the topic, mentioning that the autopsy report says the fatal wound was incredibly precise. He asks if Oscar has been practicing some lethal combat magic. Oscar replies he is always training, and Maxim quickly lets him go. Right as Oscar leaves, another man arrives. It is Hamel Glimwitz, the vice master of the Magic Tower. He claims he came to plead for Oscar, but it seems he is far too late. Maxim realizes that since Hamel personally intervened, he must deeply care for the kid. Maxim also notes that even with basic spells, no one could master a strike that perfect in just 2 short days of training. The kid is clearly a maniac for hard work. Hamel cracks a warm, proud smile, deeply impressed by Oscar. He then asks if they can head out since Fidelina is waiting. Sometime later, up on the 10th floor, Oscar suddenly remembers seeing his disciples in a vivid dream. That is why he wanted to visit this place, but it is completely deserted. Suddenly, a gardener walks up, addressing him as young Oscar. Startled, the boy asks his identity. The old man introduces himself as Wilter, the tower facilities manager, claiming they once spoke constantly. Oscar then asks him how many people actually know about his amnesia, which only makes Wilter chuckle. Oscar asks why. The man refers to him as young Oscar. Wilter explains that he has worked here for decades, and the previous legendary master was always called the Great Oscar. Oscar finds this distinction fascinating. Honestly, it is a pretty clever way to tell them apart, and he resolves to adopt the nickname. He then asks to continue being colleagues, but Wilter gently reveals that he is retiring after 40 loyal years of service. He served 3 separate tower masters during his long tenure, watching countless employees come and go. Now he is the only remaining soul left from that distant, golden era. The sole reason he remained for so long was a comforting memory of what the previous master once declared, that everyone working here was a true pillar of this tower. Wilter admits those simple words changed everything, giving him the pride to work tirelessly. Wilter is leaving with a clear purpose, but Oscar simply does not understand his choice. Confused, Oscar asks him to explain. Wilter admits that the tower is actually in deep trouble. A single look at their rundown facilities proves how bad things have gotten lately. Next month marks Wilter's 40th year working there. Hearing this, Oscar immediately jumps in. He asks if this is about the legendary long service award given to veteran staff. Every single worker except the mages gets a special medal and a massive cash prize. It is enough money to buy literal mansions, but Wilter reveals the tower simply cannot afford it. Raising that kind of cash would force others to risk their lives on highly dangerous missions. Wilter cannot live with that guilt, because this magical tower has truly become his second home. Oscar stands there in absolute shock. He never realized their situation was actually this desperate. He feels guilty. He mocked other towers for doing crazy things just for cash. But who is he to judge? At least they can pay their people. Their endless pursuit of gold actually secured them a pretty comfortable and stable future. Meanwhile, Oscar only holds honorary titles that do not pay a single bill. He cannot even guarantee a retirement fund for someone who protected them for decades. Suddenly, Wilter snaps him out of his thoughts, asking why he is clenching his fists so hard. Staring at his bleeding knuckles, Oscar quietly asks when he plans to leave, and Wilter admits it will be in 2 weeks. He gently advises the young mage to visit the infirmary, and get his bleeding hand treated. But Oscar shakes his head. He looks up and says he hopes they can remain colleagues. There is still a way. Wilter does not need to abandon his home. Oscar fiercely promises to find a goldmine of an opportunity to save the tower. Back in his room, Oscar brainstorms his next move, weighing research, lectures, and dangerous missions. But those options take way too long. Besides, he is only a level 2 mage. He needs a quick, highly profitable business venture, and crafting potions is his best bet. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes him. Let's see what caught his eye in the newspaper. He spots an intriguing ad. Meanwhile, tension rises inside the Vice Master's office. Elder Fidelina firmly states that they cannot simply ignore the stolen tower funds. Vice Master Maxim agrees it is wrong, but she impatiently asks what else they have to discuss. She demands to know if he plans to let it slide, warning that theft is a dangerous habit. Maxim calmly tells her not to stress over it. After all, he makes a pretty valid point. There is barely anything left to steal anyway, but Fidelina is not laughing. She demands they throw the guilty boy into isolation. Maxim immediately refuses the harsh order. Locking up a weak level 1 mage makes 0 sense. That is when Hamel steps in. He warns that isolation training is far too extreme, just way too harsh. It is basically gambling with the kid's life. He suggests a much safer alternative instead. Have the boy repay triple what he stole. Fidelina instantly pivots the conversation. They are running dangerously low on funds and must make a hard choice right now. She points out their unused facilities, suggesting they sell off all the potion-making gear. Liquidating the potion chamber will keep them afloat for 3 months before complete bankruptcy. Hamel completely objects. He refuses to let them butcher their own legacy. This is a magic tower, a sanctuary where mages gather to research and grow together. They absolutely cannot sell their bright future just to feed themselves today. But Fidelina coldly scoffs. Does a future even exist for them? They have waited 20 long years for a miracle, but Maxim cuts her off mid-sentence. She glares, telling the Vice Master that it is time to face harsh reality. If a true genius capable of saving their tower existed, he would never come. Looking for them, Hamel tries to speak up, but a sudden noise cuts him off. The elder whirls around to demand who is there, reminding everyone they are busy. It is Oscar. He stands at the entrance and introduces himself once again. He walks right up to the group and announces that he has a proposal. Requesting a chance to launch his business, Fidelina instantly loses her temper, screaming that he stole research funds and now has the absolute nerve to return. Oscar completely ignores her outburst, explaining he found a fascinating article in some old archives. It reveals that the Vinci estate was quarantined due to a massive flu epidemic. Hamel mentions that he remembers this. Everyone began calling the deadly disease the Cadna flu, and it was devastating. Even today, there is absolutely no cure. Years ago, the White Tower created a vaccine, but the formula vanished 20 years back. Oscar nods. Even the powerful Blue Tower, which currently dominates the entire market, has failed to recreate that vaccine, and that is exactly where he wants to begin. He plans to manufacture and sell the vaccine, reclaiming the monopoly they once held. Fidelina scoffs, declaring that this foolish discussion is not even worth their time. She points out that massive magic towers and corporations invested absolute fortunes and still failed. Now a 20-year-old boy thinks he can do it. Oscar confidently confirms that he can indeed accomplish what everyone else failed at, adding that there is just one tiny detail: the man is a genius. This makes Fidelina even more furious. She screams that he stole 700,000 bells from their last fee, pointing out a regular farmer only earns 20,000. She accuses him of not understanding money, but Hamel suddenly cuts her off. Hamel reminds her that Oscar is here as a mage, presenting a business proposal. While she manages their tight budget, there is no need to be so rude. Fidelina looks down, thoroughly chastised, and quietly offers a quick apology. Oscar realized why she harbors such deep resentment toward him. She is the treasurer, and his past actions certainly did not help. Regardless, he moves right along. Asking the director to review his idea, Hamel asks if he is absolutely sure about the Cadna flu, and Oscar nods. He begins explaining his reasoning. Archbishop Baldwin of the El Terrara Order suddenly altered his path during his pilgrimage and decided to remain in Siren for a month. The El Terrara Order worships the Mother Earth and has only 7 archbishops in total. They are meant to be holy, but reality is far different. He is allowed to Stay for up to a month at any location, but normally only for nobility. Siren used to be a magnificent city, but today it is in complete decline. Maxim agrees, though he assumed the archbishop was only visiting to offer blessings. Oscar replies that this is the exact detail that makes everything so suspicious. Why offer prayers for such a desolate region? He points out the planned route. It was supposed to go from Siren to Melbourne and then Green Whale. After those stops, he was scheduled to arrive in the city of Vinci. Oscar notes the archbishop stayed in Knox for an entire month before visiting Siren. He believes the strategy is to spend a full month at every single stop. This strongly suggests he is trying to delay his arrival in Melbourne as much as possible. After all, if an incident occurs during the trip, the delay is justified. The Altarara order will claim they angered the goddess, and the archbishop's word will be final. Maxim remembers that Baldwin knows this so-called flu is actually the deadly Cadena. He wonders aloud, is the outbreak really taking far too long to blow over? Fidelina admits his analysis is sharp, as expected from a theoretical mage, but warns that theory is not reality. After all, Hamill understands Oscar's goals, but cannot offer official sponsorship. If they back him openly, they will have nothing left to fund other magical projects. Instead, he pulls a thick envelope from his pocket, offering to invest his very own money. Fidelina glances over at the tower's vice master, who gives a small nod of approval. The only real issue, and we all saw this coming, is that the envelope contains a mere 30,000 cinos. Oscar repeats the pathetic amount, shocked, completely unable to believe his ears. He stands there frozen. That tiny sum will not cover his massive research costs. Back in the lab, Oscar stares at his vials and decides to pivot to Plan B. This tiny budget will have to fund a single, perfect vaccine sample. Then he will squeeze the rest of the funding out of the desperate archbishop. Slipping on his goggles, he smirks. Taking cash from panicked elites is almost too easy. It is finally time to warm up and get this show on the road. Magic flares in Oscar's eyes as thick steam starts billowing from the fresh mixture. He declares the time has come and carefully pours the liquid into a clean vial. Removing his goggles with a satisfied smile, he thinks a true master never compromises. Besides, he only whipped up this quick energy drink for a little warm-up practice. Right then, Frank bursts inside, loudly complaining that his back is about to snap. He drops his heavy bags, collapses to rest, and begs for something to drink. Oscar hands him the fresh recovery potion, which Frank downs in one massive gulp. Eyes widening, the boy asks if he literally just finished brewing it. Oscar praises the high quality of the raw ingredients used for the mix. Frank brags that he hand-selected only the absolute best stuff from the market. Oscar suggests he become a merchant, and Frank jokes he might, once this tower collapses. Frank yelps and asks why he did that, but Oscar just shrugs it off. Since the elder sent Frank to help, the boy asks what he should do next. Oscar thinks the elder is usually too harsh, but she made a solid choice this time. He tells Frank to start hauling the heavy crates of ingredients into the room. In reality, Oscar does not even want a noisy assistant cluttering up his workspace. He knows the White Tower is packed with young mages who have major attitude problems. They are ridiculously gifted, but every single one of them has a loose screw. Yet they can be highly useful, and Frank Sirius fits that bill perfectly. The kid is surprisingly sharp, and Oscar is actually growing a bit curious. Frank points to the dangerous black lilies and bright red chamelias on the table. He wonders if these ghost mushrooms and rare mere flowers are highly toxic. Oscar explains that toxic plants are actually incredibly useful if handled correctly. Usually, mages boil them for 12 hours straight to burn out the poison. But doing that completely destroys all the vital nutrients in the herbs. This reminds him of Yan Dynasty dumplings made in a special wooden steamer. Steaming the toxic plants instead will preserve their raw medical properties. That way, they extract 98% of the botanical effects cleanly. Frank asks if the process is finished, but Oscar says this is just step one. Begins right now. Oscar uses a magic spell to purify the steam rising from the pot. Extracts the poison, explaining they only need to separate those toxins from the hot steam. He warns the young boy to watch closely as a greenish sphere forms. In the air, Oscar notes that the rest of the steam is now completely clean. All that is left is to mix the components in the correct proportions, and just like that, they successfully create the cure for the Cadena flu. Frank looks entirely lost, so Oscar tells him to try it out himself. Frank thinks that is far easier said than Done, he cannot cast multiple spells at once, wondering if he should. Start by casting the air drain. Oscar notices the boy has pretty unstable mana control, but it is not terrible. Still, Frank does not really understand what he means by that. Oscar asks if there is an issue, and Frank complains that he is just mocking him. For not being able to cast multiple spells, he explains that mages must be level 4 or 5 to grasp this technique, while he is only at level 3. But Oscar promises to teach him anyway. The secret trick is to divide his own mind into separate compartments. On the left side, he casts spell A on the right. Spell B. Oscar encourages him to try, saying he has absolutely nothing to lose. Frank repeats the steps in his mind and actually succeeds in separating the raw toxins from the nutrients. The boy is completely stunned, and Oscar happily congratulates him. Oscar explains that this technique was only kept hidden out of pure, selfish greed. The elders simply did not want to share a skill they struggled with to any incoming apprentices for free, which eventually turned into a tradition. But on the brutal battlefield, that kind of tradition is a massive hindrance. To survive, vital secrets must be shared. The White Tower desperately needs interactive teaching and an open exchange of knowledge right now. He praises the young apprentice, saying he is quite talented. Honestly, Oscar did not expect him to succeed on his very first attempt. Frank says he only pulled it off because Oscar is an amazing teacher, which earns a playful smirk. Frank crouches down, noting they still have plenty of ingredients left, and that he needs to get back to work. Oscar just sighs, a warm smile on his face. Hours later, Frank is completely exhausted, but they manage to make 500 bottles. Maxim bursts in with bad news. Nuex, the massive pharmaceutical company from the Indigo Tower, has just confirmed an urgent visit to Siren to meet with them. Archbishop. Oscar instantly realizes they were not just stalling, they had a real plan. Maxim warns that if Nuex closes this deal first, all their hard work is completely useless. Life can be incredibly unfair, but Oscar declares the fight is not over yet. He remembers a crucial detail: the Cadna flu is officially classified as a Class B disaster, and in that case there is still something they can try. He asks the elder if he can fly faster than a standard carriage. Meanwhile, in one of Siren's lodgings, the door opens, and a voice announces that their guests have arrived. Baldwin tells them to come right on in. Maura Main, a level 5 mage, and Neil Bryan, the company director, enter and formally greet the Archbishop. Baldwin asks them to take a seat, then asks how the production of their Cadna flu medicine is going. Maura replies that everything is going perfectly smoothly. Baldwin wants to know exactly when it will be ready, so Neil explains that a few clinical trials are still required. Neil continues, explaining that with good results, they should easily get final approval from the local health authorities. He explains that these trials will only take a day or two. Baldwin asks when the medicine goes on sale, but Maura says it takes 6 months. This makes him furious. Baldwin explains he must go to Vince in 4 months. Suddenly, a knock rattles the door and Baldwin tells them to enter. He glares at Neil, demanding to know why he did not mention bringing extra people. Maura quickly replies they brought no one, all of them wonder who it could be. Oscar swings the door open. Wait, their greeting is different. He remembers just in time, introducing himself as a level 2 mage from the White Tower, arriving to make an excellent proposal. Baldwin asks what brings him, and Oscar says he is there for the Cadna flu cure. Baldwin notes he arrived just in time, since the others are there for the exact same reason. Is he too late? The Archbishop replies that he is not, because the duel from Nuch came unprepared. Maura gets angry and yells that it is a lie, claiming the White Tower has absolutely no money or technology to create such a cure. The Archbishop completely ignores her. He asks Oscar directly if he truly has it. Oscar places a box on the table, asking who would dare lie to the Archbishop of the Order. Then he opens the box to reveal the medicine sample. Baldwin cuts in. For negotiations to start, he must know their production capacity and timeline. Off to the side, Maura desperately tries to protest. The Archbishop reminds her they came unprepared, but Maura quickly fires back that they do not even have official permission from the administration. Then she turns to the protagonist, demanding to know if he actually obtained the necessary approval, but Oscar says no. Maura sneers that she expected as much. The situation remains unchanged, since her own tower can easily mass-produce the treatment the moment they receive approval. Talk about desperate. She also reminds them to consider the long history of her tower, but but Oscar instantly interrupts her, finding it hilarious that she boasts of history in front of a mage. From the White Tower, Mora flies into a rage, demanding he take back his words. Oscar casually waves his hand and reminds them that, according to history, his tower was founded first. This 5-year difference is something every master of the Blue Tower has desperately wanted to overcome, but they never will, even in 10,000 years. She seems to have forgotten the massive monopoly they once held. Mora snaps that this is in the past and nobody remembers it anymore, but suddenly an immense, crushing pressure slams heavily into her body. Oscar is furious. What does she mean by nobody remembers? Realizing this is how she truly views things, he decides he will have to refresh her memory himself. Suddenly, a panicked subordinate opens the door. He apologizes for interrupting, but gasps that an urgent call has arrived. It is from the Lord of Vince. Baldwin answers, and the Lord begins by thanking him deeply for his kindness, referring to the shipment of the cure for the Cadna flu. The Lord explains that the White Tower elder mentioned that the Archbishop prepared everything in secret, so he should thank him. He confirms all patients were cured within hours. Baldwin asks if there were any side effects, but the Lord denies it and immediately asks when the second batch will arrive, noting that Maxim said the decision was entirely up to Baldwin. Promises the Archbishop on the other line that they will deliver the next shipment immediately. Once the call ends, Baldwin faces Oscar, asking point-blank if this was all his master plan. The young man calmly confirms it. Mora screams that they are breaking administrative law. Oscar denies it. He mockingly suggests she does not actually understand how real laws work. War laws exist, but 20 years of peace made everyone forget that. He explains that during the Great War against demons, the deadliest weapon was actually a pandemic. Back then, even though mages quickly whipped up a cure, the administration stalled. They stalled too long. Countless innocent lives were lost because of their slow approval. To prevent this from happening again, the king decreed a special wartime law for medical treatments. Normal rules do not apply, not when the kingdom is under threat. Under this decree, 3 specific triggers can declare an official state of war. The first is direct conflict with another nation. The second is an active internal revolution. And the final trigger is when a Class B or higher disaster strikes. Since the Cadna flu easily qualifies, they are completely exempt from the normal, everyday bureaucratic rules. Desperate, Neil argues that if the White Tower can do it, so can they. But Baldwin immediately cuts him off, explaining they completely missed the point of this play. The race is over. It ended the very second Oscar delivered his treatment to Vince. Even worse, the Lord of Vince assumes Baldwin was secretly allied with Oscar all along. There is no turning back now. Neil still frantically tries to salvage things. He offers to slash their prices, but that only infuriates the Archbishop. Baldwin snaps, disgusted that they think they can buy the Holy Church with cheap bribes. Get out, he orders. Glaring, Mora stands up in pure rage. She vows to make Oscar pay, prompting him to wonder if she reads villain clichés. Dropping another bomb, he reveals he already officially patented both the cure and vaccine. If she still intends to sell her stock, she will owe the White Tower massive royalties. Talk about a complete checkmate. Her entire stock is now useless trash. Fuming in grinding rage, she simply cannot handle being so completely outplayed by a teenager. She storms out. She smashes everything in her path as she leaves. Neil quickly bows to the angry Archbishop and gives Oscar a cold, incredibly silent parting nod. As Neil walks past, a very distinct scent catches Oscar by surprise. He remembers that the description of that specific scent was actually incredibly detailed and precise. Mint, he stands there completely stunned, trying to piece this bizarre detail together. He stares at the door until the Archbishop starts laughing loudly. He warmly invites Oscar to sit down so they can finally negotiate in peace. Since the Indigo Tower demanded 2 million Sinos, he asks what Oscar expects. Oscar smiles. Since they dared ask for 2, he will not settle for anything under 5 million. Baldwin just bursts out laughing. Hours later, they are back at the tower. Fidelina stares in absolute, speechless disbelief at the official piece of paper clutched in her hand. It is a signed check for an unbelievable 10 million Sinos, which Oscar casually dismisses. Overjoyed, Fidelina throws her arms around him and proudly congratulates him for his absolute genius. They both agree it is surprising, since they never expected such a payout. Oscar smirked. He explained that he decided to charge some rather creative additional fees. specifically a massive publicity fee for the church's upcoming announcement. They will declare the archbishop had a divine revelation that led to the cure. For an ambitious man aiming for cardinal, that rumor is worth gold. This revelation really helps his image. He must have loved the idea because he paid 1 million sinos just for the contract alone. In return, the White Tower must deliver the vaccines and antidotes within a single week. Hamill remarks that this is absolutely wild. The disciplinary action demanded triple the original amount, but Oscar somehow secured 400 times more. Fidelina says she can easily end the entire disciplinary action now. Hamill offers to help, and Oscar replies that he needs to gather level 4 mages or higher, so Fidelina asks what she should do. Hamill lays out the plan. The potions laboratory is recruiting level 4 mages or higher, promising anyone who joins in cold hard cash and meat. A few hours later, the students pack into the potions laboratory, not quite understanding what is actually going on. Frank comments that this is quite a sight. Oscar claps his hands to get his senior's attention, but everyone just ignores him and keeps talking, so Oscar snaps his fingers, using sound restriction on them. That finally gets everyone's attention, and he explains the exact reason for the urgent meeting. They are making flu vaccines and antidotes, and he needs serious help. The other mages instantly get suspicious, wondering if this whole thing is just a scam. Oscar is completely lost as he hears these quiet rumors. He asks why they do not like him, and Frank tells him to think about everything he has done so far. Frank says he is annoying, arrogant, and has wasted all the tower's resources without doing real research. A mage approaches Oscar, asking how they are supposed to make the medicine if the production methods are lost. He replies that he has already recovered those methods, but she wants to know if they are actually proven. Oscar confirms, saying he even secured a contract with Holy Order. The mage realizes the value must be a massive fortune, and that compared to this, those meat potions are a complete joke, so she asks why he trusts them with such valuable secrets, and honestly, his answer is pretty strange. He says he honestly does not understand why they still remain at the White Tower. The mage gets pretty irritated. That is no way to talk to someone you are asking for help. She thinks she completely wasted her time coming here and turns to leave, saying she does not know his true intentions, but no one there deserves to hear something like that. But Oscar stops her, saying he knows all about the heavy sacrifices they made for this tower. The mage turns back, shocked. He calls her out by name, Lena White, a level 5 mage who rejected all other towers, including the Red Tower itself. He keeps going, naming Herrick Dryan, who refused a prestigious role as a royal mage, and Descartes Rin, who turned down being a professor at the academy, and even Sophia Rose, who was headhunted by the Golden Tower but refused the offer. Oscar admits that if a massive offer like that came his way, he might not have refused, yet none of them abandoned the White Tower. Lena then asks if the elders know about their secret meetings. Oscar replies that he simply did not want to worry them. He explains that the tower is facing the harshest winter in its history. In this desperate situation, they all could have gone somewhere much warmer, but they chose to stay in the cold. Oscar says that if he cannot trust people like them, he cannot trust anyone at all. He finishes by saying that if they do not want to help, that is fine. At that moment, Frank quietly calls him a crocodile. Oscar ignores the comment and tells Frank shouts for him to hurry, because the two of them are starting the work now. Lena watches the whole scene from a distance, totally baffled, before coughing to catch his attention. The curious veterans walk over, asking if all they have to do is wear the goggles, wondering why Oscar is leaving them to work alone. Frank admits he never imagined Oscar could actually convince these tough guys. But Oscar quickly points out that the meat he promised them is not pork. Once they hear it is high-quality steak, everyone rejoices. Soon, production skyrocketed, way more than they ever expected. Sometime later, strolling through the greenhouse, Oscar spots some delicate petals on the ground and immediately suspects the old man. There is no doubt the old man is back, likely dragged here by the towers. Vice Master, shrugging it off, Oscar sits down cross-legged to read the daily news. The front page declares that the Vince territory has officially ended the deadly pandemic. To top it off, Oscar has even been nominated for a Peace Prize. How crazy is that? Right then, Frank comes sprinting over, shouting Oscar's name in pure excitement. He yells that vaccine orders are piling up, and they are about to make a fortune. Oscar calmly says it makes sense since people naturally value their own lives. But Frank points out that these massive orders are bound to dry up eventually. Once the crisis ends, Oscar assures him that is not an issue at all, because he has already formulated a brand new potion that will always be in high demand. He makes sure to clarify this is not the rumored Stars tier potion. Gossip claims that legendary draft can literally bring the dead back to life. But mass-producing something that insane would just invite greedy thieves to steal his formula. He only survived this long by using the powerful Archbishop as his personal shield. So he instructs Frank to go gather the rare ingredients for this new batch. Frank looks over the list and grumbles that these items are incredibly scarce. Oscar is genuinely surprised, assuming they were easily found all over the Siren territory. However, those fertile fields were wiped out years ago. Cut to the bumpy road where Frank is screaming that Oscar is absolutely insane for dragging them out here on a hunch. He keeps complaining about traveling to a desolate spot where even a carriage cannot reach. Oscar tells him to keep pushing, saying they are only a few miles out, but Frank snaps back that they do not use that unit of measurement anymore, leaving Oscar completely stunned. Frank explains that all the units have been standardized, they use meters now, and pounds have officially been replaced by grams. Oscar can barely process this sudden change, wishing he could have kept his old systems. At that very second, Frank points toward a small cabin right up ahead and wonders out loud if someone actually lives there. An old man opens the door. Asking if they really traveled the whole path on foot, Frank nods, explaining that the carriage could only drop them at the start of the trail. Suddenly, another carriage, packed with men wearing expensive suits, rolls up. The vehicle stops directly on top of the old man's delicate flower garden, crushing his plants. A fancy man, clearly their leader, steps out and smugly asks the old man if he is finally ready to sell. The elder charges out of his cabin, absolutely livid. The suited man tells him to stop being so stubborn, but the elder snaps back that he would never sell, not even for Miss Rio's grand castle. The businessman, Devour Powell, sneers that playing hard to get only gets you so far, threatening that if the stubborn old man keeps up this act, beaten up, no one will recognize him anymore. Ivan, the herbalist, replies that this is absolutely none of his business. Devor insists he is speaking for the old man's own good. He says it is best to sell the land now and enjoy the rest of his life in comfort, because the land's value will plummet once the factories arrive. Ivan finds this funny and warns that as long as he is around, no factory will ever get a permit to be built. That response leaves Devor visibly irritated. He turns his head and orders his men to pack up, but before leaving, he suddenly remembers something. He notes that he trampled some rare plants on his way, and that this cash he is giving them should cover the damage. With that, he throws a wad of cash on the dirt. After that, he gets in his car and drives off. In the car, Devor comments that the guys with the old man were from the White Tower. The driver thinks they probably came for herbs, since that business brings in a lot of cash, and not just a little pocket change, but a pretty hefty sum. Devor is reading his newspaper, not really reacting to the news. Then, out of nowhere, he smacks the driver on the head with the paper and demands to know why he is only telling him this now. He realizes that if the old man gets backing from the tower, he will refuse to sell for a few more years, and for Devor, it is getting harder and harder to pay back the loan. Now here is where things take a dark turn. He decides to hire some mercenaries. The reason is pretty obvious. The subordinate tries to argue back, but Devor cuts him off. He says they can simply make the old man disappear and then buy the house at an auction. Sure, it might look a bit suspicious, but he also has powerful people backing his plays, and if mages from the White Tower get in the way, they will die too. The subordinate warns that things will get very difficult if all 4 towers get involved, but Devor just laughs and says that is ancient history. To him, the White Tower already has 1 foot in the grave. Later that night, Frank and Oscar are out in an open field. Frank comments that the old man is incredibly kind for letting them camp there and even offering them some food. Oscar agrees, looking up at the night sky with a nostalgic gaze. Ivan had warned them it was dangerous to leave at night, so they should sleep here since he is loyal to the White Tower. Frank had asked who that arrogant man from earlier was, and old Ivan told them everything. He's apparently a dangerous mobster who kidnaps, threatens, and even kills to get what he wants. This ruthless thug started buying up all the local land 3 years ago with the master plan of turning this place into the largest industrial zone on the entire continent. Oscar asked how Ivan managed to withstand all that pressure, but the old man revealed the mobster is actually the one at a massive disadvantage. He is considered a living cultural treasure because of heritage for his expertise in herb cultivation. Frank understands immediately that this means he has absolute protection from the imperial family. Oscar comments that even so, the old man could get rich by selling the land, but Ivan's response was simple. He refuses to sell because he deeply loves this land. It is his home, and it will stay that way until his last breath. Back in the present, Oscar repeats that the old man is truly a good soul. Frank finds it funny how he got incredibly flustered after saying that and ran right back inside his house. Frank points out that even the stars look much brighter out here. Oscar then asks if he is envious. Frank admits he has always wondered what it would be. Frank admits he wants to live an amazing life, though a genius like Oscar probably wouldn't get it. He thinks Oscar can't understand him, but Oscar says Frank is actually quite impressive. Frank brushes it off with a polite thanks, assuming it's just empty praise. But Oscar shakes his head. He doesn't just hand out compliments for no reason. Oscar silently wonders why his past self labeled Frank as problematic. Breaking the silence, Frank looks up and says the stars are beautiful tonight. Oscar notes that back then, stars were visible even in the center of Serene. Now the streetlights are too bright, though that old pitch darkness had a romantic side. Frank asks when things changed, then wonders if Seren's old herb industry can be saved. Oscar says it is not impossible, but they will have to discuss it with the elder tomorrow. Just then, a bizarre, chilling sensation flashes right through Oscar's mind. He spins around instantly, eyes scanning the dark to pinpoint the source. Frank asks what's wrong, but Oscar quietly tells him he just sensed 4 people. Frank didn't feel a thing, which strikes Oscar as incredibly strange. For someone with Frank's decent mana sensitivity, detecting nothing makes no sense. He tells Frank to stand up, because it's time to greet their uninvited visitors. Outside, a thug blowing bubble gum wonders what got into Devore's head tonight. The veteran killer beside him grunts that he doesn't care, as long as they get paid. A voice from behind commands them to shut up and focus on the job. It is Pistol Jack's crew, and they suspect a dangerous mage might be inside. The gum-chewing punk asks if he should head in first to scout things out. Quietly unlocking the door, he wonders if the old target has already gone to sleep. He sneers at how boringly easy this is. After all, there's no wizard in sight. But when he pulls the blanket back, he is in for a rude awakening. Desperate, he tries to turn back and warn his boss, but he's already out of time. Oscar's finger is already pointing dead at him, chillingly declaring it is too late. A concentrated blast of wind pierces clean through the assassin's skull. Throwing off his blanket cover, Oscar smiles at just how incredibly useful this spell is. It is a brilliant twist on basic magic, focusing pressure like a physical firearm. The lethal force exceeds even his own expectations, dropping his target instantly. Now only 3 enemies remain, but Oscar's eyes light up as he senses their moves. Confronting the remaining men, Jack demands to know what he did to Max. Oscar gestures for quiet, mocking them by saying Max is now asleep forever. The old mercenary calls Max a fool, muttering that he warned him to keep his guard up. Meanwhile, Jack barks an order to bypass Oscar and hunt down the herbalist instead. Realizing they aren't falling for his provocation, Oscar warns that they will regret this. Jack snaps at the old swordsman to put him down, prompting a swift, brutal lunge. The heavy steel blade strikes hard against Oscar's invisible wind barrier. It barely leaves a scratch before Oscar moves to counterattack. The old killer lets out a raspy laugh, eager for a real fight. He cackles that Oscar is quite impressive, shifting his sword midair to strike again. Oscar quickly prepares another lethal wind bullet to end the clash. The veteran assassin shouts that it is a pity, not knowing his target was so unique. He boldly claims the fight ends here and charges, but Oscar doesn't flinch. Shifting his finger slightly, he calmly remarks that this is getting rather tedious. Out of nowhere, Oscar unleashes 2 rapid wind bullets, completely blindsiding the old man. The assassin stares in disbelief, convinced his own trap should have worked instead. But Oscar strikes with flawless accuracy, hitting the target right on the mark. The attack shatters the old man's gear. Oscar scoffs that the rare tool is outdated. It is barely a modern prototype anyway. Then danger, a sudden chill hits him. He leaps back as a mocking voice sneers at him for retreating after a win. A gun barrel points right at them, and a sudden shot tears through the air. The bullet drills directly into the old killer's forehead. Oscar barely summons a protective wind barrier, which shatters instantly. The projectile still grazes his face, leaving a bloody scratch. The gunman, Jack, sighs, disappointed he did not get a clean kill. If Oscar had been just a little more distracted, he would be a corpse right now. Oscar asks if that old man was his ally. Jack just laughs him off. He calls him a disposable pawn. Criminals, they really are the worst. Jack claims his weapon has feelings too, and its high price tag speaks for itself. That is all a dead man needs to know. Oscar analyzes the gun closely. He spots 3 distinct enchantments: acceleration, enhancement, and lethal penetration. Jack is genuinely shocked, demanding to know how he figured that out. Oscar wipes the blood from his cheek, saying the proof was in the wound. Jack admits the kid has some insane skills to match his cocky attitude. He then offers him a job with amazing pay, but Oscar flatly rejects the offer. He says he would constantly feel a cold blade resting against his neck. Jack laughs, conceding the point. He declares there is nothing left to discuss. Suddenly, gunfire. Oscar dives and weaves through the bullets, finding cover. He realizes his wind magic cannot outpace those high-speed magical bullets. Worse yet, his mana pool is depleted, half empty. He seriously needs a plan. The gunman's only vulnerability is the brief moment he stops to reload. After 2 heavy rounds, there is a tiny 1-second delay. He must strike then. Oscar activates his acceleration spell and launches himself forward like a rocket. Jack spins around, completely startled. He aims, acknowledging the kid's impressive speed. But he sneers that no mere human can overcome his ultimate 3-enchantment weapon. And here's the ultimate clash. He fires, screaming that it's all over. But the lethal bullet simply slides right off the windshield. Oscar keeps pushing. Jack freezes in utter shock. How could basic acceleration deflect a specialized shot? Then he notices the shield's strange texture. Oscar is already right in front of him. He points a finger directly at Jack's head, wind magic swirling on his fingertip. Jack spits out a final insult. Too late, Oscar pulls the trigger. With his foe down, the exhausted mage finally lets out a heavy sigh. He admits that the specialized gun, Trinity, was an absolute nightmare to face. It pushed him to his absolute limits. He had to think fast to survive. He combined friction reduction and maximum durability to slide the bullet away. A single mistake and he would have been a goner. Now he must recover. Once back at the tower, researching anti-firearm magic is his top priority. But first he has to rescue Ivan and Frank. He sensed others nearby. There were 4 presences originally. He prays Frank is still holding out somewhere. Meanwhile, Frank tells Ivan to run ahead, promising her that he has this covered. He can't fight properly with Ivan around, promising to catch up soon. Ivan nods in agreement. He tells him to stay safe. Suddenly, the assassin appears, mocking their touching farewell. He calls their words touching lies. Frank asks if he's the target, but the killer just sneers. The hitman asks if he sent the old man ahead just to save his own skin. He wonders why everyone fears mages from the main towers, drawing his blade with a smirk. Since he's curious, he decides to kill Frank first, but Frank immediately retaliates with wind magic. A sharp blade of wind flies forward, and the killer barely blocks it with his sword. He closes in fast, aiming directly for Frank's chest and demanding a much better show. He asks if this is all tower mages can do, but suddenly freezes in pure disbelief. Talk about a massive reality check. Frank is holding the sharp blade with his bare hand. With his free hand, Frank swiftly slices the killer's neck, sending him straight to his knees. Frank softly apologizes, calmly explaining that he has a rather unique and unusual physical constitution. The assassin collapses dead to the floor, leaving Frank feeling a little startled by the outcome. He nearly trips over the cold corpse. Watching silently from the shadows behind him is Oscar. Oscar realizes Frank is a truly unique mage, clearly blessed by the god of wind itself. He notes that Frank can literally turn parts of his physical body into pure wind. This means normal physical strikes are completely useless, making him practically immune to basic swordsmen. Only magic or sword kai can touch him, a legendary skill Oscar only knew from books. Books mentioned the 7th Tower Master, who possessed the same innate magic. Deciding to speak up, Oscar calls out to Frank, who jumps and says he got startled. Oscar praises his quick victory, but immediately asks where Ivan went since danger still lurks. Knowing it is too early to celebrate, Frank shouts loudly for Ivan to come back out. As Frank yells, Oscar silently thinks that proper training could make this young mage unstoppable. He could easily surpass dozens of elite mages. Oscar points out he can sense Ivan nearby. By the next morning, they are back inside the cabin, and Ivan deeply thanks the group. He explains he wouldn't have survived without their help, but Oscar quickly shakes his head. Oscar admits he let one enemy swordsman escape, warning that things could have ended terribly. If Frank hadn't stepped up, they would be in serious trouble, making Frank blush. Flustered by the compliment, Frank sighs that it's over, but Ivan grimly disagrees. It is far from over. Deborah won't stop just because this single assassination attempt failed. He'll try another scheme, completely obsessed with taking the prime land they currently stand on. It's the most valuable spot in Siren, but the region's soil fertility is dying out. Crop yields have plummeted over the last 8 years, all thanks to nearby industrial magic factories. These plants constantly dump hazardous chemical waste directly into the flowing waters of the Bulf River. It's getting so bad that resisting might soon become completely pointless and futile. Soon, the soil won't even have enough residual energy to sustain simple medicinal herbs. Right then, Oscar chimes in with a pressing question about the White Tower's deep loyalty. He asks if their loyalty is tied to a promise made to Reynold Owes. Frank is visibly shocked, demanding to know how Oscar could possibly have learned about that. Oscar calmly explains it was an ancient promise originally made to the herbalists of the past. Long ago, society feared their knowledge and even branded them as dangerous heretical sorcerers. To escape persecution, those herbalists shunned society and chose to wander as isolated nomads. Their suffering continued until a wise savior stepped forward and decided to offer them shelter. That savior was Reynold Owes, the esteemed fourth master of the legendary White Tower. He sent the herbalists to Siren, promising a sanctuary where nobody would ever look down on them. Ivan finds the tale deeply moving, but Oscar admits he only knows it from history books. Ivan nods, adding that eventually, all herbalists across the continent gathered right here in Siren. Eventually, every single continental herbalist began gathering in Siren. It became the first real, permanent home for those wandering nomads. That deep history is exactly why they could never bring themselves to abandon it. Hearing this history, a completely new light shines in Oscar's eyes. He thanks Ivan for his struggles and promises the White Tower full backing. Ivan asks how. Oscar explains the crown must protect crucial human resources. Once the royals hear about the attack, they will act. Yet Ivan still worries whether help will actually arrive before it is too late. Oscar smiles, they will move instantly because the flu cure deal is signed. Meanwhile, over at Devor Pavel's office, complete chaos is breaking out. The boss screams in total fury that they completely ruined him. Bankruptcy is certain. If those herbalists escape, he is completely done. Talk about instant karma. Right then, magical police storm the building. Walker, a senior superintendent from the Imperial Ministry, orders everyone to freeze. He immediately arrests Devor for attempted murder and ruthless blackmail, plus illegal property possession and destroying precious cultural landmarks. Devor desperately claims they have the wrong man. Walker tells him to shut it. The courts will decide that. Devor frantically searches for a way out. He cannot face this alone. He needs to contact his secret backer. Hoping to buy some time, the mobster asks for a final cigar. Walker simply glares in cold silence, ordering his officers to cuff him. He has no idea who Devor's contact is, but his own boss. The Emperor that outranks absolutely any corrupt ally Devor might have. As they drag Devor away, Walker pockets the confiscated cigar. He mutters that these lowlifes have surprisingly good taste. A subordinate approaches, wondering who these targets are to warrant such speed. Walker explains the simple truth. The command came straight from the top. The Emperor loves the White Tower, making this a high-level imperial matter. Still, Walker internally questions why the crown favors them so much. Sure, they did heroic things once, but that was 20 years ago. To him, the tower is like a wounded bird clinging to a high place. Throwing it back into the sky will only make it crash harder. He reminds the young officer that 20 years ago, he was 3. Walker, however, was 12. He remembers the brutal war against the demons. Does the kid have any idea what that tower symbolized to everyone? The elder nobles still remember that hope. They cannot let it go. Shaking off the memory, Walker ends the chat. The work continues. He tells his men to finish up here and head home. Meanwhile, he is heading west to stop the factories on the Bulf River. He must force them to stop dumping toxic waste immediately. The Emperor personally added this task. Walker quietly repeats their names. Oscar and Frank, this is his subtle way of returning the favor. After all, they did the Empire a huge favor defeating Gunman Jack. They discuss future meals, but Walker refuses. Back at the tower, Frank says they are done and suggests getting a drink, but Oscar says he first needs to report to the Vice Master. Right then, someone walks up, calling out to them both. Frank is totally shocked to see who it is and quickly makes up an excuse, running away claiming he has something urgent to do. It is Hamel. The Vice Master, he asks if he just saw Frank with him, and Oscar confirms that he took off in a rush. The Vice Master nods, figuring it really was an emergency, then comments on Oscar solving yet another massive problem. He adds that they should discuss the details in his private office. Soon, they head inside. Together, once indoors, Oscar notices the Vice Master suddenly looks quite sad and wonders if some trouble has popped up. Hamel asks if Frank mentioned anything recently. Oscar replies that nothing stood out, which is when Hamel finally reveals. Got word from the Sirius family. They intend to take Frank back. He is not certain if the White Tower has already consented. Still, the Sirius family claims they have worked out all the terms directly with Frank, but he admits he has no idea how it happened. But get this, meanwhile, over in Frank's room, a knock sounds at the door. He assumes it is Grant and tells him to enter. However, the one opening the door is Oscar. He immediately addresses Frank. As the youngest heir of the Empire's biggest trading company, Oscar shuts the door and asks straight out if he is genuinely leaving the tower. Frank apologizes for not speaking up sooner, explaining that he has to return to his position and get married. Oscar is completely caught off guard, asking how long he has even been dating. Frank shares that his fiancée is sweet and comes from a highly influential family. He mentions she is gorgeous, kind, and there is no real reason to object, but Oscar cuts him off, clarifying that he is not talking about the marriage. He's talking about Frank giving up on magic entirely, and honestly, the confrontation leaves Frank speechless. He quietly asks what other choice he has since he feels his mediocre talent will never let him go far. He admits that he honestly believed he was special, hoping that in the weakest tower around he could finally become someone important, but things did not work out. He barely stands out, and that is why he accepts his family's decision. Right then, Oscar calls his name again. Frank turns and asks what he wants, stunned by Oscar's sharp tone. The legendary mage responds firmly, insisting that Frank actually has real talent. Hearing this deeply moves Frank, who fights back tears. He thanks him, saying that at least he got to hear those words from a genius before walking away, but Oscar does not give up, asking if he truly wants to fight to become someone important. At that exact second, Frank's brother appears in the doorway. He greets Oscar, coldly informing him that Frank has only 5 minutes left. He tells him to wrap up his goodbyes quickly. But Oscar interrupts, asking how much it will take. How much does his brother want to let Frank stay at the tower? Grant turns in surprise, asking who Oscar thinks he is to question him like that. He introduces himself as the older brother of the fool. Standing there, Oscar then confidently proposes a deal. Grant calls him reckless and mentions that he has heard the rumors about his genius. Still, he does not understand how Oscar dares to negotiate a deal with the powerful Sirius family. Oscar reassures him it will not be a bad trade for either side, promising to turn Frank into one of the White Tower's top mages within 2 years. In the long run, this would bring massive benefits to the Sirius family. Grant admits the proposal is highly tempting, but wants to know the penalty if Oscar fails. Oscar answers right away. He will surrender all profits from the Cadna flu vaccine for the next 50 years. To guarantee the deal, the tower's vice master will witness the contract. Grant is intrigued, and honestly, who wouldn't be? He asks if Oscar is going this far because Frank is truly worth it, or just a friend. Oscar's answer is instant. He is doing this because Frank is actually crucial. He reveals his plan is to restore the White Tower's legendary reputation within 5 years. Potion production is only the beginning, and for that grand plan he needs Frank. Grant notes Oscar is young, and as a businessman, he has no reason not to exploit this kid's naive confidence, but instead of accepting immediately, he decides to add a twist, claiming Oscar has forgotten one crucial detail. Real merchants value trust over easy money, never making deals blindly. Therefore, Oscar must first Prove his actual capabilities. Grank has a level 5 knight serving as a bodyguard, tomorrow at noon. Oscar has to fight him to prove his worth, to avoid being completely unfair. He makes a rule that the knight will not use his sword force. Oscar knows Grank won't let go of Frank that easily. Grank shuts the door and leaves, noting he expects Oscar at noon tomorrow, and if Oscar does not show, he will assume the massive deal is officially dead. Alone with Frank, Oscar calculates his slim chances against a level 5 knight. Talk about a disaster. Frank looks worried, asking how they will handle this, suggesting there is still time to call the whole thing off. Oscar is surprised by Frank's intense concern. He then says he thinks winning is possible since a level 4 mage can do it. Frank asks if Oscar expects to somehow reach level 4 in a single day, which he calls completely impossible for his current state. He clarifies he was not talking about himself, but rather raising another mage from level 3 to level 4. After all, his brother never specified Oscar had to fight alone, only that they had to prove their ability. Oscar looks at him, calling his friend by his full name, Frank Sirius. He promises to turn him into a level 4 mage if Frank steps up to fight. Next, in the tower's training room on the 40th floor, Frank complains about this insane overnight goal. Oscar ignores the doubt, telling him to keep his body relaxed and natural, close his eyes, and begin to circulate his mana as normal. He monitors his flow for a few seconds before tapping several points on Frank's body. Oscar explains these exact spots are where his mana constantly leaks during active circulation, dragging down his overall spell potency. Frank asks if fixing these leaks is enough to level up, but Oscar shakes his head, adding that most mages completely overlook these micro details. However, the ones who actually care are the supreme archmages. That is why, starting right now, Frank will practice this every single morning. Oscar lays down the precise adjustments needed to refine his inner energy flow. The goal is for this perfect circulation to become as natural as breathing. Frank wonders if that is the entire secret, but Oscar smiles, telling him there is one more thing he needs to see. He wants a demonstration of the magic Frank unleashed during that desperate struggle in the herb field. Frank hesitates, explaining it is not about trust, but because he is genuinely terrified of that magic. He explains his magic, admitting he nearly died the last time he actually used it. Growing up only made him more anxious, especially since his family mocked his lack of results. Under constant pressure to prove himself, he decided to create something entirely new. He wanted a magic others could never copy, wondering what would happen if his transformation went further. Instead of changing just one limb, he envisioned turning his entire physical form into wind. He believed it would grant him ultimate power, but it was an incredibly reckless gamble. At first, he actually thought he had succeeded, but horror quickly set in. Something was horribly wrong. His physical body was literally scattering into the breeze. By the time half of him vanished, his internal mana had completely spiraled out of control. He screamed out in terror, begging for salvation. Frank admits that without Shasha, he was done for. He would have ceased to exist entirely, and that feeling of fading away is something he dreads repeating. He never wants to feel that despair again, but Oscar recalls him using it in the field. Frank clarifies it was merely an automatic reflex triggered in a split second of danger. Frank finds his own weakness pathetic, but Oscar tells him he should not think that way. He reassures him that most mages deal with similar struggles, so the solution is straightforward. Since Frank already has a strong grasp on mana control, his core issue is simple. He just needs to focus his mind on that, but Frank argues it is all about talent. Oscar agrees that natural talent usually decides things, but says there is still another way. They can still acquire that skill. Frank immediately asks if he must contract a demon. Oscar denies this, saying those creatures would not even bother showing up if summoned. He explains the real plan, summoning a wind spirit and transplanting it directly into Frank. Panicking, Frank awkwardly introduces himself to the newly summoned spirit of the wind. He begs it for help, but absolutely nothing happens, forcing Oscar to explain the truth. His spiritual affinity is utterly terrible. Still, Frank insists he felt a sudden breeze. Oscar tells him it was only a tired sigh, but Frank continues to whine. Oscar tells him not to feel down, since very few humans have spiritual affinity. Frank complains, asking why he even suggested it, but Oscar reveals his backup plan. He has another method, a summoning ritual he casually learned in his past life. He successfully cast it when visiting the Elven Kingdom. Frank asks if he should chant But Oscar tells him to step aside and let the master handle this first. He secretly wonders if the legendary Spirit King will still remember his presence. Closing his eyes, Oscar remembers that their last encounter was nothing like this room. They had stood directly in front of the towering, ancient world tree itself. He calls upon the wind, commanding the spirit to manifest before him. Frank watches. He is completely baffled, wondering if Oscar truly succeeded on his very first attempt. The wind spirit materializes, asking if this particular mortal summoned him after so long. It has been 26 years. Oscar immediately realizes it is the exact same spirit. He requests a contract, but the ancient spirit replies that formalities are unnecessary. It asks if the human wishes to form a pact with Celestin directly. But Oscar declines, realizing he probably should have clarified his true objective first. He explains that he does not require a companion spirit for himself. He summoned the Spirit King entirely to help his friend. The very next day they gather. Inside the dueling chamber, Elder Grant and Vice Leader Hamill are deep in discussion. Hamill remarks that the creator of the cure is remarkably stubborn. Grant steps forward. He introduces today's knight, Lasley Morgan, a level 5 master. Oscar greets him. Grant explains the rules are simple. First, to grab the opponents. Necklace wins. If 5 minutes pass without success, the knight loses. Oscar agrees and says they can start, but Grant warns him to just raise his hand to stop. Oscar replies that he is perfectly fine wearing his current, casual clothes. After all, he is not the one fighting today. Then, Frank steps forward. Standing right before his brother, Grant is shocked and demands to know the meaning. Oscar reminds him the challenge was to prove his ability, not fight personally. That is why he trained Frank yesterday. Grant admits he should have been specific. He did not state the mage must fight, but warns his knight won't hold back. Oscar calmly explains that he simply thought a level 4 mage would do better. Grant is completely stunned, pointing out that Frank was only level 3 yesterday. Oscar counters that to make Frank a top-tier mage, this level is expected. If he wants to reach the absolute peak in 2 years, he must perform. Annoyed, Grant orders Lasley to fight for real. Oscar claps Frank on the shoulder. He tells him to stay calm and execute everything he practiced just yesterday. Frank nods, stealing his resolve before walking into the arena with quiet determination. Lasley notes it has been quite a while since they last faced each other. And then the match begins. Frank immediately backs away, creating some distance. After retreating about 20 meters, he feels a sudden shift in the air. The pressure radiating from Lasley is immense, even without using his chi sword. The knight's class 5 strength is absolutely terrifying. Frank considers yielding. Oscar notices his student's visible hesitation. Will he throw in the towel? But then Frank remembers Oscar's words. He remembers being told he was needed. Oscar needed him for his new magic tower. He would be lost without him. Frank clenches his fist tightly. This is the very first time someone actually needs him. He unleashes a sharp blade of wind, determined to prove his worth. Lasley effortlessly deflects the attack, but notes Frank has genuinely improved. The boy can double cast now, dispersing the kinetic impact instantly. It feels reminiscent of the legendary sword control techniques from the Eastern nation. Even so, Lasley easily keeps his guard up with only his sword. Suddenly, one of the wind blades flies skyward. Lasley decides he has seen enough. He charges forward, reaching out for the boy. Frank is stunned by his incredible speed. Desperate to block him, Frank summons a colossal, giant blade of wind. Grant cannot comprehend this level of growth in just 12 short hours. He suspects some forbidden art. Oscar assures him the method is perfectly safe. Grant scoffs, pretending he was not worried. Meanwhile, Frank pushes even harder. His progress is undeniable, but now, Lasley's blade is closing in fast. Grant watches, convinced his brother was never meant to be a combat mage. This reckless, rapid growth will only destroy him. Pain is inevitable. Grant believes it is far safer for him to stay at the company. No danger, no worrying the family. Meanwhile, Lasley moves in for the finish. The knight's hand reaches for Frank's neck, ensuring he survives this trial. Grant thinks this will save him, but suddenly, Oscar declares the match is over. Grant turns around in utter shock. Why is Oscar smiling right now? Turns out last night's spiritual transplant was a total success. Frank explains that the wind god's power triggered automatically when Oscar attacked. But Oscar admits he still cannot dissolve into the wind on command. His old trauma holds him back, making Frank worry about tomorrow's battle. Oscar completely dismisses that worry, declaring that his absolute triumph is guaranteed. He then asks Frank if he really thinks that is the spell's only trick. He tells Frank that there is a far more fascinating secret within this magic. The most powerful aspect of this technique is actually called unification. Unification lets him transform absolutely anything he touches directly into wind. It works on clothing or solid objects, serving as their ultimate hidden trump card. Strategizing like this makes winning so much sweeter, and Frank is doing just that. Dodging Lasley's massive fist, the boy moves like lightning to grab the necklace. Frank halts right behind his opponent, signaling the final blow. He clutches the stolen relic in his right hand, then it begins to glow. Frank cheers in absolute triumph, while Grant stands up in utter shock. He clearly remembers the magic healer, claiming that Frank was forever disabled. Hamill laughs warmly, declaring the match finished and asking for a final verdict. While Oscar praises his student, Grant is left staring in complete disbelief. He wonders if Oscar actually trained him in just a single day. The knight quietly admits defeat, shaking Frank's hand as Hamill watches them. Hamill notes their hard path, but Grant simply asks him to watch over Frank. Grant admits his younger brother has finally grown up just a little. Quickly telling him to forget those words, the older brother turns and leaves. Frank stands in complete silence, simply staring at his brother's back. Oscar silently watches the emotional display, finding the older brother rather amusing. Frank is clearly thrilled, although he still pretends to ignore the rare compliment. The next morning, Frank looks dubiously at their bleak training entrance. He complains that the facility resembles a prison, but Oscar defends its history. Frank demands to know why his training must take place in isolation. Oscar explains it was a special request from the highly expectant vice master. Despite the boy's endless whining, Oscar tells him to stay positive. He urges him to look on the bright side and focus on assisting the spirit. Frank grumbles in response, but Oscar tells him to stop being a baby. He reassures his friend that this intense training regime is not going to kill him. They bid each other farewell, while Oscar silently apologizes in his mind. In reality, Oscar was the one who specially requested this harsh isolation. The night before, Hamill questioned why Victor should be locked away. Oscar argued that isolation is exactly the kind of pressure Frank needs. The vice leader agrees to go easy on him, then shares some good news. The massive Sirius company has officially granted access to their entire network. Oscar instantly asks if this incredible deal comes completely free. He knows the corporate giant calculated their massive future profits very quickly. Rebuilding the tower and elevating Frank will bring them both an absolute fortune. Accepting this highly beneficial deal, Oscar listens as Hamill raises a second question. The vice master asks if Oscar would be open to delivering lectures. Oscar hesitates, fully aware of the hidden motives behind the offer. Let's look at the potions department. Now, Oscar wants to know if there is a specific reason the White Tower is scaling up so fast. Hamill just laughs, calling him sharp before asking, has he ever heard of the Night of the Mages? It is a massive festival where every tower gathers. The Emperor originally wanted them to display their skills and build real harmony, but obviously that never happens. In the end, they just spend the whole time brawling among themselves. Oscar remembers this event was canceled years ago, so why bring it up? He wonders if the Emperor is actually planning to bring back the tournament. Hamill confirms he is spot on. It is not public knowledge just yet. But the announcement drops on New Year's. He has a bad feeling about the Black Tower if they keep pushing to join the 4 legendary towers. A massive target will be placed right on the White Tower, and that is why he is so worried. Oscar suddenly agrees to lecture. Hamill is stunned. That sudden shift in expression is incredibly strange. Later, on the 36th floor, Oscar reflects on the White Tower. They are arrogant, but at least they are trying to improve. Plus, it is a relief that Frank is a level 4 mage. That summoning ceremony with the low-level spirit was a brilliant masterstroke. He feels truly humbled that a demigod remembers a mere human. Later on, during a summoning, the spirit demands to know who dares call it for contracts. Oscar simply tells it to calm down. Then he calls for Salafrian of silence, ordering him to announce to everyone that the white mage has returned. The spirit warns him about speaking the king's name so casually, but suddenly, beautiful butterflies begin to manifest in the air. The spirit is completely shocked. Who is he to summon the spirit king with one command? Oscar just laughs. He says telling him would spoil the fun. Will the spirit cooperate? As requested, the spirit confirms the queen permitted a simple transplant. Without needing a contract, Oscar says that is plenty and thanks the creature. But the spirit warns him that the queen sent a reminder to keep his promise. Oscar knows she has no reason to worry. He will definitely keep it. Her powers saved countless lives. He fully intends to repay this debt with interest. Now he holds the flyer for his lecture on reinterpreting basic magic. But first things first, he needs to take care of his family. Elsewhere, a sharp-dressed man walks down the hall. He recognizes quite a few faces in the crowd. They all looked totally lifeless the last time he saw them. He asks if this lecture is strictly for level 3 mages, noticing there is nobody of a higher tier around. His colleague suggests it is a basic class, meaning stronger mages are busy. A nearby girl mentions that the rumors must be true. The White Tower is clearly loaded with cash. She heard the lecturer was personally invited by the vice master. Her friend adds that the event is under imperial observation. Talk about some serious pressure. They can hardly wait, but a young man named Damien Proud immediately tells them to stop talking nonsense. He points out the class is held in a room nobody ever uses. The girl sighs, calling Damien way too negative. He snorts back that if this was actually a serious investment, they would not be teaching such an incredibly basic topic. They study basic magic reinterpretation. He tells everyone to look at the 32 students. Only low-rank mages showed up, which he notes with a sarcastic smirk. If the class was actually good, even that genius noble would be here. But just then, a sudden interruption cuts through the room. Without warning, every single sound completely vanishes. The blonde prince is stunned. He cannot hear a thing, just absolute silence. Oscar enters the room. The newcomer smiles and says it is a pleasure to meet them. He introduces himself as Oscar Crushen, their new magic lecturer. The class is shocked to find their instructor is only a level 2 mage. Oscar notices their stares, noting they seem disappointed by his low rank. One student realizes the man is pretty sharp, but this still makes no sense. A low-level mage lecturing them is ridiculous, especially since he is not even using magic. Oscar calmly announces that anyone who regrets coming is free to leave the classroom. Since they are no longer academy students, no professor is forcing them to stay. But he has a strict condition. To leave, they must prove they do not need him. And they only have a 10-minute time limit to do it. Within those 10 minutes, they must speak out loud that they are leaving his class. He asks with a slight smirk if the test is perhaps a little too easy. The students are absolutely furious, since he has made them completely mute and still demands they speak. But that is the challenge. Talk about a pretty brutal test of their abilities. Since he is only a level 2 mage, his silence spell is not absolute. This means it can be broken. If they cannot speak, they must stay and learn. Oscar secretly left a few deliberate flaws in the magic for them to exploit. But finding those openings is still incredibly difficult, as the sand in the hourglass slips away. He mockingly asks the quiet room if anyone is actually going to succeed. Suddenly, Damien slams his hands on the table and declares he broke the spell. Oscar recognizes the boy from the beginner class. Damien stands tall and proud. The young man boasts that it was pretty easy once he calmed his mind. Just then the 10 minutes run out, and the silence breaks for everyone. Oscar tells the class to quiet down, since only Damien passed the test. Damien smugly notes that he clearly does not need this class anymore. The professor easily agrees, but the blonde prince nearby finds this reaction pretty suspicious. To be honest, the boy was actually a bit curious about what they would learn. Oscar reads him like an open book, knowing exactly what the kid is thinking. So he announces that Damien will get a special reward for passing. He gets to learn a spell. Oscar asks him which basic magic he likes most. The student answers that his favorite is Wind Cut. Oscar tells him to demonstrate. Though Damien grumbles that this is a total pain, he summons the magic anyway. He asks if that is enough, and Oscar nods. Today, he will show him the real deal. Damien is confused. Does this teacher not see the perfectly formed magic right there? Oscar answers that, by his standards, that spell is just a poorly made copy. He points out two major flaws in the boy's magic while picking up a knife. The first glaring issue is that the spell is not actually made of wind. He turns to Damien, asking him to define what wind really is. Damien answers that it is moving air, but Oscar explains things are not that simple. Fire is fire, wind is different, it is air in constant motion. His creation was no wind cut. Why? Because stagnant water rots. Air magic cannot float without constant movement, they must pay attention. To this, after all, the White Tower is the home of wind, in other words, it must flow, if not, it simply vanishes. As he just demonstrated, Demian asks what the second problem is. Oscar explains that he spent far too much mana to conjure the spell, making it incredibly inefficient. It would be much better to lower that cost. When a mage's power reaches a high level, you can read their entire personality through their spells. Oscar asks to be a bit intrusive, he wants to dig deeper. He can see right into Demian's past, as a proud family member. He naturally tried to follow in their footsteps, copying their famous wind cut. But that technique is a highly difficult basic spell, since he tried to copy it before properly learning magic, he forced too much. Mono and that bad habit has stayed, even today. Oscar finishes by saying that once the cause is clear, Demian will easily achieve a perfect wind cut. Correcting this is key, but it is a shame because Oscar just lost a student. But wait, Demian starts walking and asks, who said he was leaving? Not him. He heads back to his seat. 3 weeks fly by, rumors are already spreading like wildfire about Oscar Crushen. Word is he is a top-tier instructor, one student doubts. It would help anyone at the intermediate level, but another says that even level 4 and 5 mages are attending his lectures. The first student suggests they go too. The blue-haired student smiles, saying he was waiting for this exact moment and they need to leave right now. It is only 7 in the morning and class starts at 9. He says they must arrive early, or they risk getting completely locked out. Despite their idle chatter, all of the students in the cafeteria stay put. Then boom, everyone stands up at once, ready to go. Inside the classroom, people wonder why so many level 4 and 5 mages are there for a basic magic class. Even Elder Maxim is present, which makes this session feel like a highly advanced magic seminar. Oscar enters the room, wishes everyone a good morning, and announces today's spell is incredibly important. It is a good thing they came. The students cheer and the instructor adds that this spell will shape their entire lives as mages. It is the basic wind spell. The students are completely and utterly baffled. This is the most basic spell of all, the first thing they learn. Elder Maxim speaks up. He came only to watch, but curiosity got the better of him. He asks if Oscar is really teaching the basic wind spell here. Oscar confirms this and asks the elder himself to demonstrate the magic. Maxim conjures the wind spell. The force is so immense it literally repels the entire classroom. He asks if that was sufficient, and Oscar politely thanks him. Next, he asks student Amy Raven to do the same. She wonders why he picked her over far better mages present, but she summons the wind spell anyway. The surrounding students notice that her wind feels completely gentle and warm. Oscar then asks if anyone can spot the major difference between the two spells. The students start guessing about strength but then a quiet voice from the back of the class mentions the temperament of mana. Oscar immediately points her out. Veronica Fricks is spot on, and just as she explained, there is a genuine shift in the temperament of the mana they made. It is absolutely fascinating, especially since the entire process, from initial formation to the final spell casting, was identical, yet one wind was dry and burning hot while the other felt like a gentle spring breeze. This difference is so massive it is hard to believe they cast the exact same spell. Next, he wants to throw out another question. Who here truly understands mana's temperament? One brave student guesses it relates to the 4 elements, but the professor shakes his head. That is a completely different concept entirely. The key is deep understanding. To start, they must look at the White Tower's balance, asking why the white and blue factions are the ones representing it. Someone guesses it is elemental traits. Oscar nods. They hit the mark. He explains that while the red and gold factions are insanely strong and fast, they completely lack harmony. Only wind and water can adapt between hot and cold. That is why they represent pure balance, though their methods differ wildly. To show them exactly what he means, he brings up a very simple example. Boiling water is incredibly basic. Under normal pressure, you just need heat. Set it to 100 degrees, wait, and it is done. Warm wind, even simpler. Seriously, changing wind is far easier than boiling water, and shifting with it is effortless. He shows them, shifting his own mana effortlessly like a chameleon. Instantly, a freezing chill sweeps the room. wind is simply freer than other elements. It can mimic the destructive flame of red, the sheer speed of gold, or the ever-shifting form of blue's water, but water has rigid limits. You cannot mix water and oil after all, but wind, no boundaries exist. With enough imagination, a mage's mind can shape the wind into literally anything. Only the wind can perfectly harmonize with every single thing in existence. This is why White Tower mages must think deeply about how they view the wind. So what is the wind to them? That is the core of today's lesson. But wait, right then, a sudden movement completely breaks Oscar's focus. A student notices the elder muttering to himself and reaches out to check on him. Oscar snaps immediately, telling him not to touch the elder under any circumstances. He commands the entire room to step back. Do not disturb the elder. The confused students murmur, wondering why he is suddenly shouting orders. Oscar explains that Maxim is undergoing a rare awakening. Right then, the elder opens his eyes. Oscar asks if he is all right, but Maxim sighs with frustration. He still could not reach level 8. He thanks Oscar, who shrugs it off. It is simply a teacher's job, Oscar replies, but secretly he is absolutely thrilled. With this success, his classes will run smoother, and no troublemaker will challenge him. But best of all, the intense gaze of Veronica Fricks watching from the crowd. He has officially captured the attention of a notoriously difficult problem student. He remembers her from the warnings written in the original Oscar's personal diary. The following day, Oscar strolls through the tower, recalling her parting words. She mentioned finding something highly intriguing waiting inside the training room. She seemed friendly enough, but that sharp, calculating look of hers told another story. They pity him, assuming he knows nothing about the facility. He arrives at the spot. Is this it? He heard 3 of the 13 training rooms are around here. But the color of the doors looks totally different from what he expected. Is the room special? They wouldn't make a door different without a good reason. It has to be magic, the kind of door that only opens with a touch. Oscar looks up. He feels a strange change in the air around him. Suddenly, a voice welcomes him. The voice introduces itself as the AI named Argo. This state-of-the-art training system runs on high-level magic engineering. Oscar figures those snobs at the Golden Tower must have spent a fortune on this. Argo offers personalized training if he registers his personal information. Oscar flatly refuses. He decides to train as an unregistered user instead. Argo asks for a difficulty level, explaining there are 100 total. Oscar starts at level 1. The system confirms this, summoning 3 floating balls. The target is simple. Pop these 3 balls using physical attacks or magic. Argo warns him, any wide area of effect spells will be automatically cancelled. Easy work, Oscar pops the balls instantly and passes level 1 without sweat. Not bad, deciding to raise the stakes, Oscar listens as Argo asks for his choice. Oscar demands level 100. Immediately, the system issues a warning. The target size will decrease, speed will skyrocket, the balls will become hostile. He is advised to abort the training if he feels his life is at risk. How tough could level 100 really be? He is about to find out. In an instant, a flash of light zips right past him. Argo begins instructions. Use physical attacks or magic to destroy 1,000 balls. Area of effect spells are banned, as are attacks hitting over 10 balls at once. Oscar fires 3 wind blades, wiping out a straight line, but he must destroy them all. At this rate, his mana will dry up. He must optimize his power output. He spends minimal energy to create a flurry of tiny wind daggers instead. They burst the spheres in sequence. Making them bigger would be far more effective. But then, this would no longer be training meant for children. The drill ends. The system congratulates him for clearing level 100. Lying flat on the floor, Oscar chuckles that it was a decent warm-up. Mages today must start young. No wonder their skills surpass the older generations. Their level is much higher now. He realizes he needs to step it up. Harder training and a proper diet will help him gain serious muscle. Just then, Veronica enters. She admits she didn't expect to find him training. Oscar notes she arrived early too. He greets her, but she seems quite surprised. She expected him to ignore her after their rather tense conversation earlier. Oscar says he was just looking, then drops some deep philosophy about healthy bodies. This feels weird. She knows that healthy body philosophy is definitely not his. Is he sick? He is mimicking the famous quote of Oscar Sage. Why would a guy who despised her noble background suddenly change? They are both orphans, yet he acts different. She calls out to Argo. She requests a quick level 50 routine, checking for any ranking updates. Specifically, she asks if Killian is still on top, and Argo confirms. He checks the rankings. Is Killian still there? Argo confirms a sudden change. A change just happened. The girl tells the system to show her, and the name AAA appears. She desperately wants to know who this is, but Argo explains that security protocols block the information. Maybe it's a powerful elder, but she quickly tosses that theory completely aside. To even qualify for this ranking, a challenger must be level 5 or lower. Yet this mystery rookie just shattered the demon's legendary 10-minute record. Argo confirms he secured the number 1 spot. Still, she demands to know his true identity. The system flat out refuses due to security protocols. Frustrated, she asks if it is Oscar Crushen. But Argo just repeats the exact same line. Later, Oscar walks the halls, dreading his next meeting. He wonders if his body will ache after he runs into the demanding Elder Maxim. Oscar offers a polite greeting, and the Elder smiles. Perfect timing. He has a favor to ask. He reveals that according to Fidelina, local merchants are suddenly refusing to buy their potions. Maxim blames the rival Azure Tower and figures Oscar, being in production, knows the real story. Oscar eventually heads off, absolutely irritated by the situation. He fumes over those corporate bastards while noticing a massive line building outside the local cafe. A passing student explains that a massive email went out to all the young apprentices. It targets everyone from the 1st to the 5th rank, asking if Oscar has heard the news. With a massive salary hike starting today, Oscar wonders about their exact job roles. Are they delivery workers? Nearby classmates cheer, celebrating some much-needed financial relief. Oscar thinks the delivery gig is pretty small since it needs a massive workforce, especially when the only real return is gathering simple feedback reviews from the local citizens. A red-haired courier happily mentions that the generous elders are even feeding them. This sudden detail instantly sparks Oscar's interest, prompting him to step closer and investigate. He asks if they actually interact face-to-face with customers during their daily runs. They confirm it, needing a signature on every single container. That proves delivery success. Trust me, Oscar knows exactly how to use this info. Soon after, a curious Hamel sits down to hear Oscar's new business proposal. He quickly sums up the concept, asking if the plan is direct, door-to-door sales. Oscar nods. The old man agrees that bypassing merchants is a solid strategy. Since the wholesale merchants are striking, targeting the everyday consumer makes perfect sense. Still, he warns that their current recovery potions are hardly meant for everyday use. Oscar simply smiles, promising to brew up a completely brand new recipe instead. Hamel is stunned by the bold idea, but Oscar explains it is actually pretty simple. He is just tweaking a mid-tier recovery potion that already works well in the White Tower. The goal is to carefully fine-tune the brew into 4 distinct, specialized formulas. He will tailor them by age and gender, deeply analyzing how each version should function. His goal is connecting with the city, and a few days later, we see the results. An elderly man sits on a bench, sighing heavily over his fading strength and energy. A passing mailman greets him warmly, handing over a fresh letter with a bright smile. The old man beams, deeply relieved to know his old companions are still kicking. This friendly mailman notes they belong to a legendary, long-lived generation. Our old friend chuckles, muttering that he is 80 but feels completely drained. His head feels constantly heavy, prompting the mailman to suggest a potential remedy. He offers him a small bottle, the latest breakthrough direct from the Magic Tower. It is a specialized tonic called S0, designed to help senior citizens recover. This particular tonic is highly recommended for the elderly because it boosts daily immunity and he says it provides amazing energy and even mentions Old Miller from 2nd Street who, when hiking right after drinking it, this tonic is actually Oscar's own creation. Yes, Oscar Crushen himself, the true genius of the White Tower, so it must work. The mailman explains the regimen is only 1 bottle per week. Each bottle costs 30 bells, but the old man scoffs and refuses to be fooled. He insists these tonics never work. The mailman asks if he truly believes that. Why would he bring such an incredibly expensive medicine out here for absolutely no reason? He has an exclusive offer since Graham's address is located right in Siren. With a special event running, an annual subscription means they will deliver 1 bottle weekly. Graham thinks he can afford it if he just cuts back on smoking and drinking. To seal the deal, the mailman suddenly offers the first bottle free. Graham snatches the bottle and chugs the entire thing right then and there. The next morning, his body feels surprisingly light, and he feels like a new man. I mean, can just one bottle really have such an insanely strong effect? Down in the town square, his old friends spot him and immediately wave him over. They play a quick game of chess, and Graham absolutely dominates the entire game. Winning easily, he notes that his focus and mental clarity are sharper than ever today. His friend asks if his children bought him some elixir, but Graham denies it. He boasts that he took a tonic from the White Tower, and it actually works. Meanwhile, over at the White Tower, a panicked assistant warns Oscar of trouble. At this rate, their massive stock of potions will spoil because the Blue Tower launched. A massive 50% off promotion. Lena knows they want to crush them. They are trying to drive the White Tower out of the market entirely, which is insane. They cannot make a profit, but Oscar reveals the sale lasts 2 weeks. Lena warns him that 2 weeks is more than enough time to destroy their business. Oscar explains that the Blue Tower wanted them to bundle their flu cure. He flatly refused, as exploiting the Cadena flu disaster for money is completely unacceptable. People would be absolutely outraged by this, and their rivals would have the perfect excuse to attack them. Lena asks if he is simply going to accept defeat here, but Oscar smiles. Fortunately, they still have massive amounts of intermediate potions in their stock. Lena agrees, noting that nobody would even notice if 100 bottles went missing. So Oscar hands over the recipe for their brand new Zero tonics instead. The brilliant plan is to repurpose all their unsold intermediate potions into these new formulas. Keeping useless potions around when they are not selling makes zero sense. Plus, they will offer some great benefits if a family buys more than 2. Families buying multiple bottles will get a massive discount. If possible, they can also pay the local information guild to spread a rumor. The rumor will focus on a highly potent tonic called M0. Oscar jokes about claiming it boosts virility, but Lena heavily doubts that tactic works. 3 weeks later at the Blue Tower, Mora is confident they have won. He believes they have crushed the competition, and his boss will be incredibly happy. But right then, his furious department head slams the office door wide open. He fiercely demands to know if Mora has actually read the latest news headlines yet. Talk about a wake-up call, his boss violently slaps him across the face. He furiously snaps at him to grab the newspaper and read the front page immediately. He asks if sacrificing profits is seriously the only trick Mora has up his sleeve. Especially now that the White Tower has pivoted to tonics instead of standard potions. Their revenues are soaring, and Mora just cannot wrap his head around this disaster. He was absolutely certain those guys were on the verge of total bankruptcy. The papers credit their subscription model for offering massive convenience. To make things worse, Oscar Crushen just announced a massive move. He is keeping his potions heavily discounted to counter the Blue Tower's underhanded tricks. Mora instantly snaps that this is a low blow, but his boss cuts him off. The department head looks right at him, who cares about fair play in business. Mora was too busy staring at charts, celebrating a victory he had not even secured. Now no amount of pressure can stop the hype surrounding the White Tower. People actively want their products, and they are fully prepared to meet that demand. So the boss delivers a cold warning: Mora is going to be incredibly busy. He has to claw back every single coin the Blue Tower just lost. Working for free won't even cover it. Meanwhile, prepare for a wild scenery shift to the Yan dynasty. A squad of elite martial artists is desperately trying to contain a massive beast. They scramble to form up, but one warrior gets violently launched through the air. He crashes right behind them, instantly shattering whatever courage they had left. How can anyone defeat a monster of this tier? But then, a howling wind sweeps down. A voice echoes from above, claiming it has finally tracked down its target. A powerful woman descends, demanding the beast quietly crawl back to its own territory. If it dares to refuse, she warns that she will literally turn it into dust. She prepares her unrelenting wind magic, casually complaining that this always seems to happen. One of the fighters steps forward to ask if she is from the White Tower. Shasha turns and immediately recognizes him. It is Zhang Chun of the Nine Dragons sect. She pulls back her hood, introducing herself proudly as the Tower Master. She gets straight to the point. Did they bring the item she requested? Zhang Chun quickly hands over the latest imperial newspaper, noting how famous she is now. The front pages are completely covered with news about her faction. Shasha hesitates, genuinely terrified that her business went broke while she was traveling. Or worse, that she got kicked out, but she plays it completely cool. She casually remarks on their continued success, but inside, she is absolutely floored. She flips through the pages at blinding speed, completely scanning the articles. She seriously wonders if her disciples fabricated this entire paper just to comfort her. The delivery system is working flawlessly, something she never thought possible. Still shocked, she announces her immediate departure and gives them one final order. Send the mission reward directly to her imperial bank account, she says. She summons her wind magic once more and blasts off into the sky. She needs to see what kind of madness is happening at her headquarters. Meanwhile, back at the tower, Lena praises Oscar as a true genius. Oscar is confused, but she explains his single interview completely rattled the Blue Tower. Potion sales are completely off the charts, spreading way beyond their local borders. Multiple major cities are begging to distribute their exclusive inventory. Riding this wave, she reached out to the military, but they are staying neutral. Oscar remembers the army has always favored the Blue Tower faction anyway. Back at the tower, Oscar explains that since the potion supply is finally stable, Lena no longer needs to report every little detail, but she insists it is her duty. Because he is the boss, still, he suggests monthly updates since he is quite busy. With the warehouse completely packed, Oscar needs to focus on securing the tower's internal stability, which includes restoring their long-lost magic grimoires to their former glory. He expects to recover this knowledge quickly, but he also foresees a pretty big problem. Seriously, it would look incredibly suspicious for a rookie to drop a high-level theory. So he decides he wants to publish the research under a proxy. Someone with real reputation, status, and decades of experience, right on cue. A nearby door swings open, and a tired man steps out, stretching his arms. He complains about how long it has been since he last saw daylight, and Maxim agrees. Fidelina notes that Schwain actually wrapped up his research much earlier than expected this season. Merging after 3 months and eagerly asks him about his latest breakthrough, but Schwain admits that things are not going well at all. The magic simply refuses to manifest. And although he must present it at the upcoming festival, he still lacks the core formula. Maxim tells him not to stress, while Fidelina asks if he has been at this same research project for 7 whole years now, which Schwain sadly confirms. Maxim suggests bringing in a smart assistant like Oscar, but the seasoned mage instantly rejects the idea. This is not some simple task a level 1 rookie can comprehend. However, Fidelina stands up for Oscar. She admits that she used to look down on him too. Maxim points out that Schwain has been completely out of the loop lately. He asks if Schwain has noticed the sudden shift in the tower's general mood. Schwain agrees that everyone seems much happier. Maxim smiles, telling him they basically hit the jackpot. He explains that this massive success is solely due to Oscar finally unleashing his dormant talents. And Schwain really needs to see it. They quickly catch him up on everything. Schwain rubs his chin, summarizing that the kid is apparently good at alchemy. Fidelina corrects him, saying he is actually a business genius. Maxim chimes in, adding that the boy is a brilliant teacher with the sheer wisdom of a high-level mage. Schwain agrees to meet him, though he keeps his expectations quite low. He is not trying to be arrogant. It is just that given their massive level gap, it is basically impossible for them to see eye to eye on complex theory. The depth of knowledge they possess is just on completely different playing fields. After all, no matter how gifted the boy is, a level 2 mage will always have limits. Schwain remains focused on his true goal, which is restoring the legendary, innate magic of the ultimate magical prodigy, the legendary Archmage, Oscar Sage. Now watch when they finally meet. Schwain immediately drops a surprise test. He introduces himself as a specialist in theoretical magic, who is currently working hard to revive a lost branch of ancient magic. He explains his current project is stalled, and he cannot finish it alone before the deadline. Right then, Oscar realizes this old man is the perfect proxy he has been looking for. Schwain admits he feels a bit guilty springing this challenge on him out of nowhere. But Oscar calmly smiles. He is not about to pass up a chance to show off. Schwain nods and gives him 50 minutes to solve the formula, while Oscar is already mentally laughing because this test is a total breeze. Offering only the basic insights of a simple level 2 mage, he begins solving the test. He figures any level 5 or 6 theoretical researcher could easily solve this in their sleep. Looking at the questions, he concludes Schwain is merely hunting for basic mistakes. This means the research must already be in its absolute final review phase. Suddenly, Schwinn catches something bizarre about his style. The boy is solving these tough equations far too quickly. It is impossible unless he thinks like an elite Archmage. Oscar is already flipping right to the final page. Schwinn nervously tells himself that the kid is probably just scribbling random nonsense. With a calm expression, Oscar pens down his final answer. The professor assumes the boy got totally stumped by that final, high-level question. But he is actually stunned for a completely different reason. The question describes the exact magic he created in his past life. He wonders if some of his old research notes actually survived. He confidently slides the completed test paper back to Schwinn, declaring that he is all done. Schwinn offers polite praise, but assumes the boy just wrote down random guesses. Honestly, it feels like a bit of a letdown. It is disappointing. He wanted to see how the boy truly solves problems. Maxim's glowing recommendation had set the bar incredibly high for him. But as he begins grading, the professor notices something truly bizarre. Wait for it, every single answer is flawless, displaying the expertise of a grand scholar. He simply cannot believe his eyes, so he looks up and asks Oscar directly. He asks point-blank if the student is truly certain about his final answer. Oscar calmly nods, so Schwinn asks which of the 4 multiple-choice options he chose. Oscar calmly replies that he actually wrote down every single option based on a variable value. He explains that it all relies heavily on the variable value of mana. A fixed value would only cause massive problems, so he used variables instead. Stunned by this logic, Schwinn immediately asks if they can test these values right then and there. The spell activates flawlessly, leaving the professor completely speechless and in awe. He grabs Oscar's hands, promising to list him as a co-author on the thesis. Showering him with endless thanks, Oscar just asks if this was his core research. Schwinn eagerly confirms that it is the legendary magic from the exam. He confirms it is the masterpiece of Oscar Sage, the legendary master of the White Magic Tower. The infinite serpent of Uriaros, hearing his own old name, shocks Oscar. Oscar cannot fathom why they would ever want to bring back this specific magic. It is designed to require a single spark of mana to generate infinite power. While that sounds fantastic on paper, by Oscar's standards, this magic is a failure. After all, humanity had already conquered everything from the deepest seas to the vast lands. But they never managed to conquer the sky, their final frontier. The Blue Sky Project was designed specifically to conquer that endless sky. During the ancient war against the demons, they began designing massive airships to gain control. This is exactly why he created the Urioro spell to power those vessels. But even with near-flawless calculations, it could never generate enough raw power. There are far better spells to utilize if energy efficiency is not the main issue. Pursuing this dead end is simply not worth the massive effort. Schwinn says he'll inform Shasha that the foundation for their delivery service is ready. Oscar is shocked to realize the Tower Master built all this just for a single spell. Even if she missed him, she still couldn't bring back this legendary magic without even knowing how to use it. But Schwinn explains this was the only way to conquer the skies, and they've taken their first step after 7 years. Oscar asks if they are chasing the same old dream, and Schwinn confirms that Urigaros will act as the engine. Oscar notes that it is not impossible to move an airship with just the wind from the spell, but Schwinn replies that it is impossible to build a true airship with Urigaros alone. Oscar focuses on that last word, asking what he means by alone. Schwinn explains the situation is completely different from 23 years ago because they have something new. He then points to the advanced magic engineering gear on the table. Back when Oscar launched the Blue Sky Project, the Golden Tower worked right alongside them, uncovering secrets of magic engineering to develop the technology after the war. Their goal is to harness the power of Urigaros. With magic engineering finally making an airship fly, the plan is to use a specialized battery as an energy bridge. There is a battery that recharges with the wind, continuously feeding the mana to build a powerful heart of infinite energy. Oscar asks if the Golden Tower knows about this, but Schwinn says they don't. The Golden Tower thinks airships are a joke and is busy working on a completely different mode of transport, a massive iron horse that runs across the open land without tiring, called a train. Oscar thinks that Although he's never seen one, the Golden Tower master he knows is not the type to invest in a losing bet. This train will change everything. Yet even a train won't match the sheer impact of an airship. Talk about a massive power play, Schwinn adds. That's exactly why they launched this delivery business first, accepting the disadvantage. The plan was to corner the market early. Currently, transport is handled only by carriages and cargo ships. Trains are going to shift that landscape entirely. But if airships enter the game, even trains will be left in the past. Their true goal is conquering the skies, something no one has ever achieved, to spark a new era. That is why they decided they must reclaim the spell and debut it at the White Night Festival. This dream only became a reality because of Oscar. Looking down, Oscar realizes the dream he abandoned was kept alive by his disciple. He knows he must pave the way as her master, so they will go further. They won't just showcase the magic, they'll reveal the actual airship prototype at the festival. That is their new objective. Schwinn doesn't hesitate to agree. Revealing a physical prototype is way more impactful. Oscar is absolutely right. He instantly decides to share all his research materials with Oscar. Schwinn hands over a heavy book, telling him to study it carefully. Oscar wonders what this could be, only to find complex formulas he's never seen before. Then, Schwinn explains that these pages hold the secrets to building the magical engineering battery. Oscar pulls up a chair to take a closer. He looks it over, realizing formulas from the Araros technique are woven right in. The material is so detailed, it looks like they verified absolutely everything. This is incredible work, meaning they are ready to start immediately. Schwinn agrees, but first, he has to confess something very important. He wants to apologize, leaving Oscar completely baffled by the sudden shift. The professor warns that as soon as they announce their new research, the Golden Tower will try to stop them, even if blood is spilled. Oscar is actually relieved by this, saying he can handle that much. Schwinn stares, worried the young man is taking this threat way too lightly. But Oscar knows they will try to sabotage them dozens of times. If he keeps looking for excuses to quit, he will never succeed. And that is his real fear, growing weak and running away forever. He refuses to freeze up and end up as nothing but an empty shell. The White Tower has already lost far too much simply because they lacked power. But he believes this project will finally give them the strength to fight back. That is why he is taking the risk. Schwinn just laughs, shaking his head. He jokes that Oscar is stealing all his cool lines, then reaches out. He formally welcomes his new partner, hoping they will make an amazing team. On day one, Schwinn points out that their current Euler equation is actually capping their total power output, and Oscar has to agree. Stability drops hard once they bring in the engineering side. Since their goal is a flying airship, stability must come before raw power. By day 4, modifying the magic system is a massive headache. Schwinn suggests trying a parallel system, and Oscar thinks that works. It integrates well with magic engineering, but there is one problem. They have skipped 2 straight meals, and Oscar is absolutely starving. And just like that, the entire room suddenly plunges into total darkness. Oscar sighs that these blackouts are happening way too often now. They decide to call it a night. On day 6, Schwinn shares a sudden realization. He admits he never would have finished this complex research without meeting him. Honestly, he used to think building an airship was a pipe dream. But they are flying through the steps at an absolutely breakneck pace. Now he actually believes they can do it. Soon after, Oscar speaks up. He notes that the Manhwa part makes 0 sense, but Schwinn disagrees. He insists that is exactly what makes his unique magic shine brighter. Suddenly, an official summons calls Oscar straight to the Vice Master's office. Schwinn says it is his turn to look cool by finishing the Ouroboros battery. Inside, Hamel notes these constant blackouts are becoming a real problem. The local mana supply keeps dropping, so they need a cleanup. Since the power plant is overrun with slimes, Oscar volunteers to help. Hamel is grateful, explaining they have been far too short-handed to clear it. Oscar confidently promises there will not be another blackout once he is done. Hamel tells him to meet up tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. He will be pairing up with Veronica. Oscar wonders if this job really requires a level 4 mage, but Hamel says it is standard protocol. He orders low-level mages to pair up, noting that Veronica seems quite worried lately. Oscar bows and accepts, realizing the slimes are just a convenient excuse to meet. Just an excuse. The next day, Veronica immediately demands to know why he is late. Oscar casually wishes her a good morning, noting he is only 5 minutes behind. Their carriage rattles through the busy city. Suddenly, Veronica grabs his attention. She reminds him they are definitely not heading toward a typical classroom today. Oscar agrees since their destination is the power plant, but she cuts him off. That is not what she means. She is the designated leader here. Although he might be smarter, her actual field experience is far superior. Oscar asks if she is telling him to stop acting like her teacher. Silence falls. He asks if she slept well, noting she looks exhausted. Veronica instantly snaps at him to shut his mouth. Oscar refuses to drop it. He asks what is worrying her. She notes it has only been 3 seconds. 3 seconds, that is how long since she demanded quiet. He just wants to help. If there is an easier way to solve her problem, they should take it. The girl is quite unsure how to react. Oscar quietly studies her. He looks her over. This is the girl his diary repeatedly praised as a prodigy. Missing this chance to witness her real power is simply out of the question. So he asks if she would feel better sharing what is going on. Veronica silently fumes. The literal cause of her insomnia sits right in front of her. She desperately wants to summon a mighty, howling gale, just like Elder Maxim's. But failing annoyed her so deeply that she trained all night without sleep. She snaps back, demanding to know what he actually means by all this. Oscar deduces that since she was fine before, his class must be responsible. She admits it, explaining her desire to summon a fierce wind like Maxim's did. But she simply cannot. Oscar replies that her failure is entirely obvious. That intense style of magic simply does not suit her personality at all. Veronica retorts that he does not know her, claiming she has always wanted that power. He suggests a fresh perspective, asking what kind of wind she thinks he has. Veronica answers bluntly, it would definitely be an arrogant, irritating wind. Oscar denies this, claiming his personal breeze is famous for being deeply comforting. She scoffs instantly, commenting she has never heard of such a thing. He reflects that he used to be that way, though he finds it pretty fascinating. Never did he see himself as comforting, but he wonders if she truly wants that warmth. The elemental temperament of Mana is not something you can obtain on a whim. She must discover the exact elemental style that perfectly matches her own unique personality. Veronica thinks it over for a silent second, but still refuses to back down. She insists that if that were true, his magic would absolutely be annoying. They finally arrive outside the Mana power plant. Oscar instantly senses danger. There is something incredibly strange up ahead. The entire facility looks completely ruined. Blackouts, no wonder the city suffered so many of them. He has no time to think. Suddenly, Veronica unleashes a powerful wind press, targeting a nearby creature. She brutally crushes a slime against the solid ground with absolute, overwhelming force. Oscar finally realizes exactly why everyone praised her talents so highly. Her casting is incredibly fast, requiring almost zero concentration to unleash. Making her a spellcaster like Majiro was genius. Her level is already incredibly high that other mages look like absolute amateurs. Veronica glares back annoyed and demands to know why she is doing all the work. Oscar approaches and she warns him to watch his step because the slimes are clustering. He halts and assesses the battlefield for a moment. Dozens of slimes are packed inside the magic power plant. Veronica screams to ignore the inside and just focus on the ones out here. But Oscar senses something is totally wrong. Watch how they are moving right now. They seem to be running away from whatever is lurking inside the facility. Veronica scoffs, mocking him for treating dumb slimes like geniuses, but Oscar explains they are just acting on raw survival instinct. She frowns, asking if he means some nightmare of a monster is hiding in there. He decides to investigate and confirm the danger. Inside the plant, Veronica stares ahead and asks what that is. Oscar explains it is a white silkworm cocoon from a mana-eating moth species. He figures the high concentration of energy lured it here, and Veronica suddenly realizes the deadly creature has not hatched yet. Oscar confirms the cocoon is still metamorphosing. Veronica finally gets it. The slimes were never the main threat here, and destroying this cocoon resolves everything, but Oscar delivers a quick mix of news. Good news is the silkworm itself is harmless. Maxim could vaporize this instantly. In 5 seconds flat, but the bad news, once hatched, they are absolutely ravenous and consume every single living thing in sight. Looking at those fleeing slimes, The transformation is likely seconds from finishing, that cracking sound echoing through the room. Is the beast breaking out of its shell? He tells her to prepare for battle. Veronica stands frozen at its massive size, stammering if that colossal nightmare can fly. Right then the giant moth fully emerges from its shell. Veronica panics, asking why they cannot just flee. Oscar warns that running means the beast will slaughter the innocent townspeople nearby. They must put it down right here. Veronica snaps that she does not care and tells him to step aside. Oscar sees she is actually trying to shield him from a level 4 threat, so he fires off a magic distress signal. Hopefully, their driver is close enough to get it. Bring help. Veronica summons raw mana into her hands, muttering that this overgrown bug will not survive another minute. She unleashes her strike with wind press and jet boost, pushing her magic to the absolute limit with a smug smirk. But wait, Oscar violently yanks her hood back, slamming her down to the floor while instantly weaving a defensive gale. His magic flows effortlessly. To block the counterattack, Oscar roars that the moth's glowing powder can dissolve a human instantly. That opening she saw was a deliberate trap. This monster has a terrifying intelligence. The moth starts gliding along the high ceiling of the facility. Veronica asks how he even spotted that invisible dust. In the dark, Oscar explains he concentrated pure mana straight into his pupils to track every microscopic speck. Right then, his gaze flares with a vibrant green light. The beast strikes instantly, firing a massive energy beam. Oscar barely blocks it with a windshield. As dust settles, the grim reality sets in. Simply deflecting that single blast drained 70% of his total mana reserves. Luckily, the beast requires 5 minutes to recharge. He urges her to finish this immediately, but Veronica whispers she cannot move her legs. Oscar instantly realizes it happened. He blocked the giant beam, but some of it pierced her shield anyway. She got hit. Veronica urges him to run ahead. She says she can still buy them some time. If they both want to live, he must leave now. But he knows she is lying. The air around her is trembling, so he acts. Oscar touches her head. Veronica gasps. He tells her not to be afraid. He will never leave without her. Not a chance. Everything will be fine. White Tower mages never abandon their companions. He prepares his next spell. It is an acceleration spell. He has only 28% of his mana left. One single blow. He needs to end this now, rushing forward at maximum speed. Veronica watches in disbelief. How is this fool going to face that beast? She told him to run. If he dies here, she will personally kill him. Oscar easily dodges the incoming strikes, using several giant hands of wind. It is a good thing he brought a secret weapon along. He raises his pistol. He asks the moth if it is feeling calm now, bidding it farewell. The shot fires. It only clips the wing. Oscar is completely stunned. The massive recoil instantly dislocates his arm. He could not even aim. He missed the head entirely. Then he notices something. The wings are moving. They are moving differently. The beam is already recharged, firing straight at him. It was planning to escape from the start. He realizes the truth. He absolutely cannot let it go, but his remaining mana is too low. Suddenly, he sees a silk thread dangling in the air and leaps as fast as possible. He manages to grab the thread, yelling out in triumph, but the beast pulls back. The moth drags him forcefully. Veronica screams, "Why did he grab that?" It drags Oscar through the sky like a helpless toy. He is spinning. He is already starting to feel motion sick. Suddenly, a magic circle opens up. Oscar mutters that the creature is quite feisty. Then he aims at the insect, asking if it knows why humans have 2 hands. He grabs another silk thread, explaining it is to land 2 strikes at once. He fires. The beast only has 1 head, so he wins all the same. The monster is completely pierced by the power of the Trinity. Oscar begins to fall from the sky with a smile. He comments that he is out of mana and Veronica has to save him. She quickly conjures an air cushion and a hand of wind to catch him. She catches the protagonist, but with some difficulty, calling out to him. Is he alive? For a few seconds, Oscar does not react, but suddenly his eyes snap open. Veronica screams. He scared her to death. Right then, Maxim arrives, asking if they are all right. Oscar complains that his arms are dislocated while Veronica keeps hitting him. The next day in the tower, she asks if he saw the newly published newspaper article. The reporters were faster than she expected. How does he feel about being a hero? Oscar replies that he used to like that childhood dream, but Not anymore. Veronica talks about donations, but Oscar says he already has enough gold to protect his own people. She can keep all the ambition. Suddenly, Frank opens the door, asking if Oscar is safe. He says he came running the second he heard about the injury, and Oscar is already cracking jokes. It is no wonder the scruffy guy smells bad, but he smiles as he notices something. Fran's gaze has grown much deeper, proving he is now a true level 4 mage. Fran, confused, asks what happened, wondering why Veronica is even standing there, but she immediately cuts him off. Do not get familiar, she warns. She makes it clear they are not close, and walking through the academy is a complete nightmare, thanks to his stupid rumors. Sighing, she wonders what the point of all this even is, before asking if Oscar will take first place in the training room, though he has no idea what she means. She quickly tells him to forget it, brushing it off and saying it does not matter. Just then, Elder Maxim knocks on the door, surprised to see them both there. He informs them that Elder Hamel wants to see them, each for a different reason. Fran smiles and agrees instantly, while Veronica remains serious. Maxim asks how Oscar is holding up, especially his arms, and Oscar says everything is fine. Then the elder hands him a box containing the silk moths core, which has been officially awarded to him. Oscar notes that a core like this is worth thousands of bells, but Maxim explains that Hamel wanted him to have it. In the end, everyone agreed that the valuable core rightfully belongs to Oscar. Maxim then asks if he intends to sell it or consume it, and Oscar replies that he will eat it right now. He explains the core lacks abundant mana because the moth just metamorphosed, but it remains incredibly useful for recovery. With that, he tosses the core straight into his mouth. The rich mana instantly floods his body, and Oscar concentrates to stay as calm as possible, guiding the energy with absolute focus. Watching this, Maxim thinks that aside from some shady elixir, this is Oscar's first time handling pure mana so flawlessly. Controlling it like this is the mark of a true genius. Hours later, Oscar opens his eyes. He stretches his arms, thanking the elder for waiting all night, but Maxim warmly congratulates him on reaching level 3. Oscar comments that he feels much stronger, and Maxim bids him farewell. Once alone, Oscar realizes he does not feel tired at all. He picks up the pistol resting on the workbench next to him, wondering if he can design a custom spell to reduce its heavy recoil. Meanwhile, over at the magic power plant, a sharp-looking man in a suit approaches. The guard asks for his identity, stating the area is currently closed for an investigation into dangerous elements. The visitor introduces himself as Nebula Grime from the Royal Headquarters for Special Investigations, presenting his official badge. The mage wants to know his business. Nebula explains he is here to investigate, since it is highly unusual for a silkworm to hatch so close to the city, asking for full cooperation. Given his ties to the royal family, the mage quickly agrees. Nebula nods, explaining that he needs to read the residual mana traces, and begins to analyze the lingering energy flows, concluding that 2 powerful mages from the White Tower defeated the beast, one level 2, the other level 4. It is a massive relief they managed to resolve the situation. Nebula points to the primary battle zone, and the mage confirms that is where the silkworm underwent its metamorphosis. Nebula spots a highly concentrated mana signature, realizing it was the silkworm itself. He also sees that one of the White Tower mages struck first. He notes that the monster's speed was incredible, but it became highly agitated before being completely immobilized. It was wounded, limping from an injured leg, but what truly surprises Nebula is the trail. The trace left by the fighter who beat the silkworm. He wonders who this mystery person is. He cannot see their form, only their path. It means they moved without leaking any mana at all, completely hiding their mana signature. Searching the ground, Nebula suddenly spots an empty bullet casing. A mage used a gun, and a modified one at that. This is exactly where the mana traces vanish. Right where the traces disappear, he realizes the mysterious gunslinger probably chased after the fleeing silkworm. Chased after the flying silkworm. Nearby, another mage asks for the impressive level 4 hunter's name, calling his feat incredible. Taking down a silkworm nearly alone shows amazing promise. But Nebula immediately corrects him, explaining that the other man has it all wrong, because the powerhouse who actually defeated the silkworm is actually just a level 2. His name is Oscar Crushen. Nebula is stunned, unable to understand any of this. How could a mere level 2 leave such traces? Talk about a complete mystery. He recalls reading about a vaccine in the papers, prompting him to ask a quick question. Is this the same person who recovered the cure for the deadly Cadena flu? The other mage nods. Nebula realizes why those bullet holes looked so familiar. It must be Gunslinger Jack's signature weapon, though he still has serious doubts. He doubts a level 2 could handle that beast. Controlling the recoil with basic mana is incredibly tough. Which is exactly why he demands to know more about this mysterious Oscar Crushen. What kind of man is he? Meanwhile, back at the Magic Tower, Oscar looks around in confusion. Why are these books in such terrible condition? They belong in a second-hand shop, not here. Not inside the Magic Tower's grand library. This place once stood proud. It was untouched for centuries, filled with famous, priceless treasures, at least before. That is how it used to be. Now, it looks like a cheap school library. He cannot believe centuries of rich magical history simply vanished overnight. And he knows exactly who to blame for this tragedy. Honestly, he had a backup plan. A solid plan to prevent this disaster, 20 years ago, right before that fateful night. The night of the purge when they fought the High Priest, they intended to copy everything. Backing up every single book, a crucial task he trusted entirely to Edna Salas. But where did she go? She swore to keep her sacred oath even if he died. It makes absolutely no sense for her to vanish for 20 long years. It is totally unlike her. So he resolves to track her down, but first, he needs advanced spells to shatter his limits. Break his limits and regain stability, since his biggest problems are finally taken care of. The potions department should leave him alone for a while. He approaches the young receptionist, asking if she is the librarian and if they have any updated records on dragons. Records from the last 20 years. She nods politely and offers to show him what they have. Oscar feels a wave of relief. He bets they did not skimp on buying precious new knowledge. Even if they were running extremely low on funds, the librarian pulls out 3 books. But Oscar immediately spots something off. Why on earth do these books look like that? Like children books, he does not understand why she is recommending them. She explains this covers the hero Oscar Sage, who stood entirely alone when the dragons fled. Oscar asks if they have any research material that is not illustrated. The girl shakes her head, explaining he would need to visit the Capitol Library for that. But she mentions a fascinating rumor about a dragon that fought alongside humanity until the end. Supposedly, this loyal beast went after its own kind, who chose to abandon the world first. But Oscar immediately rejects the idea. He knows that could never possibly be true. That would never happen even if the sky fell. She was the one who felt most disappointed when her own kind abandoned them. Hamel sighs to ease his stress, wondering if he needs another path to track down Edna. Meanwhile, Fidelina reports that all their mage's external activity fees are fully paid. Hearing this, Maxim admits he is deeply touched. The two share a laugh, and Hamel promises to make better plans so that this kind of trouble never repeats. Other guilds still offer their mages outside jobs, but the crew remains incredibly loyal. Hamel admits he truly wishes he could reward their unwavering devotion, but things will stay tight until they reclaim their lost advanced spells. Fidelina tells him not to feel too guilty, noting there is always a limit. For the number of high-tier arts a single mage can master, the real issue is that only Sage Oscar knew them all, and by the time Shasha took charge, only 6 remained. Hamel recalls that just 20 years back, they boasted 64 types of advanced spells, every single one spectacular. He then wonders if Captain Chester still has no intention of returning, and Maxim confirms it. The captain will absolutely not come back until his final task is done. If he did return, they would have way more spells to teach. Fidelina admits this is a tough problem to solve immediately, so taking their time is wise. Switching topics, she mentions a dark rumor of a terrifying assassin called the Mage Hunter lurking in the north. She suggests limiting night travel past 10 for now, which leaves Maxim deeply shocked. He suddenly remembers that Oscar left earlier, heading straight to Baron. Fidelina demands he be brought back immediately, but Maxim explains that the kid left at dawn and is already far from Siren. Hamel orders them to contact their Baron outpost immediately and send Oscar back the second he is spotted. No matter how talented he seems, he is just a boy at level 3. He is still a fragile mage who needs protection. Meanwhile, Oscar has already reached his destination, muttering about how flashy the city looks. He notes that this place was a desert 30 years ago, before massive casinos bought up most of the prime land. In the area, regardless, the spot should be close. Suddenly, he catches sight of a shadowy silhouette inside an alleyway, and then a low voice calls out his name, the stranger. Says he has been waiting specifically for Oscar Crushen. Right away, Oscar suspects the blue tower is already targeting him, gauging the heavy mana. This foe is at least a level 4 specialist. It is extremely annoying that they deployed an assassin. The exact moment he stepped out of Siren, Oscar asks what happens if he refuses, and his foe replies that he will drag him back by force. Oscar sighs deeply, muttering that in this case he has no alternative. The hostile mage suddenly lunges with a rapid kick, and Oscar shields himself, but the barrier shatters like glass. His opponent looks impressed that the boy blocked it. Oscar mockingly asks if he was supposed to stand completely still and get beaten. Quietly, he notes that the shock absorption shield he set up was shattered by a basic physical kick. He realizes losing his momentum means instant defeat. Watch how he handles this. He launches a counterattack, kicking a soda can at his foe. The assassin easily dodges and sneers, asking what a worthless little can could possibly do, but the harmless can detonates with bizarre explosive force. The blast completely blindsides the assassin, catching him entirely off guard. He takes a direct hit from a column of flames, reeling on the ground. Oscar lunges. He tightly grabs the hunter's hood and violently hurls him back. With all his might, he slams the man's head into the dirt. Oscar backs away, wondering if he held back way too much, but the battered mage slowly staggers up, calling Oscar incredibly strong. He says it is time to fight for real, but Oscar thinks he is just being cocky. Suddenly, the mage charges with everything. Oscar realizes this sheer speed is coming from a jet booster. He has no idea when the guy even conjured it, but he can still react to this insane pace. Still, a heavy kick catches him right in the chest, slamming him hard against the wall. Sliding down to the ground, he hears the mage mockingly ask if he is awake. The man boasts that the blow should have put him out, but Oscar snarls that it did not even hurt. The mage warns the next strike ends it and raises his leg. Oscar positions his palm, waiting for the full force of the charge. Even if he cannot see the move, he will not miss the physical mana he sensed earlier. It is time to unleash his full awareness. He uses his secret martial technique, the Oscar-style ultimate blow, pushing his fist like a heavy wave. The assassin closes in for the kill, completely clueless about this bizarre move, failing to understand why Oscar is just punching empty air. The mage thinks it is a massive joke, but a sudden impact slams into his chest. The raw impact makes him spit blood, instantly hurling him backward toward the wall. He lands headfirst inside a trash can. Oscar warns him to freeze or his internal organs will rupture. The dazed mage asks what kind of magic this is, and Oscar calmly calls it resonance. He explains that the localized wind wave creates a precise frequency that vibrates through the target's body. It is like when matching frequencies amplify each other, destroying the internal organs from the inside. As they say in the legendary Yan dynasty, it is striking the mountain to hit the cow. The battered mage groans that it is way too complex. Asking when Oscar became this strong, Oscar dryly replies that they must have fought before. The man nods, confirming they indeed clashed multiple times in the past, usually inside the White Tower gymnasium, but Oscar is still incredibly confused about why all of this is suddenly happening out of nowhere. He asks who sent him, and the mage reveals the name is Hamel Glimwitz. When Oscar asks why, the man explains there is a dangerous assassin in the north called the Mage Hunter. Oscar sighs, saying he should have just led with that. The mage warns he will drag him back by force if needed, sent directly by the Vice Master. Oscar can only wonder what kind of crazy person cannot even communicate normally. Yet this annoying attitude and the weird feeling of déjà vu make him wonder why this guy feels so incredibly familiar. Finally, he asks for his name. The warrior introduces himself as Killian Rockwood, a proud fighter from the deep forest. In that instant, the pieces click, and Oscar finally realizes who this is. He asks if he knows Rodden Rockwood. Killian instantly beams with immense pride, declaring that was his father. He adds that his father was a companion of the great Oscar. Rodden Rockwood was a level 8 mage from the Forest tribe, famously known as the White Lion, and Oscar's trusted right hand. Oscar remembers that when Rand first arrived at the White Tower, his communication skills were absolutely terrible. In short, Oscar just beat up his old friend's son. After this, Killian warns they have a major problem, and Oscar can only agree. Makes sense why Oscar looks so shocked. Killian's internal organs are completely ruined. Oscar gently asks if the pain is too much. Killian just shakes his head. He insists the physical pain is nothing. The real problem is his unfinished mission. In this state, he cannot finish it. That is where Oscar comes in. Oscar must take his place because the contract cancellation fee is absolutely insane. Backing out means instant bankruptcy. Oscar cannot let his dear friend's son go broke. Killian weakly points to a poster hanging on the wall. It shows a stunning young woman. She is known as the voice of heaven. Killian was hired to be her bodyguard. Sometime later at the Grand Baron Hotel, Oscar knocks on a room door. A female voice answers. Oscar introduces himself as Killian Rockwood. The woman inside is named Evelyn. She welcomes him inside and explains she is Marin's manager. She looks him over carefully. She remarks that he looks quite different from the wild rumors. Oscar blames his suit. Evelyn tells Marin to stand up. She announces that their new bodyguard has finally arrived. The young girl slowly turns around and offers Oscar a warm, friendly greeting. She says it is a true pleasure to meet him, introducing herself as Marin Maria. Oscar introduces himself as Killian again. Evelyn asks what kind of tea he prefers. He says he does not need anything. Marin warmly thanks him for taking the job. She mentions hearing his success rate is over 80%. That made her expect someone tougher. Oscar quietly observes Marin, recalling the background details Killian shared with him earlier. She suddenly appeared out of nowhere 3 years ago, possessing a voice that brings peace. Because of this incredible gift, people everywhere started calling her the Holy Singer. Oscar initially thought the title was pure exaggeration, but her speaking voice is truly beautiful. Right then, Marin looks up and asks if he is a highly responsible person. Oscar nods, silently thinking that this protective reputation actually belongs to Radon's son. Marin smiles, saying responsible people are always the nicest. Evelyn then hands her some water. She tells the girl to drink up. Once she does, Evelyn starts explaining the job details. Simply put, Oscar's primary duty is to protect Marin from targeted assassination attempts. Marin has been getting direct threats, demanding she cancel her upcoming Baron show. They ignored the warnings at first, but the letters just kept coming. Oscar asks if they have any clues about who is behind these threats. Evelyn points to Arite, a rival singer who debuted 2 years before Marin did. She asks if he heard about the sudden death of Baron's mayor a few months back. Oscar nods, remembering the newspaper reports. It turns out Arite was the mayor's only daughter. Now she is running as the leading candidate to become the next mayor of Bonn. It seems the press is being heavily bribed to keep quiet about her dirty work. The truth gets completely ignored anyway. Oscar nods, this runs incredibly deep. And get this, it is a massive political mess, way too big for one bodyguard. He cannot fathom what a high-profile figure like Arite actually stands to gain here. If her plot gets exposed, she will be the first one facing massive consequences. Marin speaks up, explaining that the ultimate goal is the iconic Baron Dome venue. Oscar questions if performing at that specific venue is really such a big deal. Evelyn confirms it holds 100,000 people, granting the performer a massive opportunity. The headliner gets to sing directly for the Emperor on New Year's Eve. One must pass brutal auditions to earn this legendary, highly sought-after honor. It is the grandest stage any performer could ever dream of reaching. It is the performance that will change her life. Oscar then asks how many other guards she has hired besides him. He needs to know to plan his strategy, but the answer is shocking. There is only him. She tried to hire a mercenary agency, but nobody accepted the job. Oscar takes a sip of water and considers the situation. In an operation this massive, he expects at least level 4 assassins. He has no idea how many will show up, and he must deal with all of this alone. That is why he asks about the cancellation fee. He is thinking these conditions are too brutal, and the smartest thing to do is cancel the show for Marin's own safety, but she reacts by calling him a coward, which leaves Oscar completely confused. She screams at him, asking if he seriously expects her to cancel after fighting for it for 3 years. She throws it in his face that he only cares about his 1 million bells, and then Oscar finally understands her earlier warning. Furious, Marin grabs her own hair, asking if he did not promise to take responsibility. Then she tells him to go to hell. In that moment, she rips off her pink wig, and Oscar realizes there is something incredibly different about her. In fact, Marin is a Mermaids are legendary creatures from old tales, and the description is always the same. They are beautiful, but unlike the stories, they can turn their tails into legs whenever they want. Marin slams the table next to him and demands to know what his problem is. She asks if this is his first time seeing a mermaid. Honestly, Oscar thinks to himself, it is definitely his first time seeing one in the middle of the continent, and now that strange bathtub in the room makes perfect sense. He remarks that he thought mermaids fell ill away from the sea. Evelyn steps in to explain that Marin is half mermaid, allowing her to stay human form for much longer. Oscar asks if that means she is half human, and Evelyn confirms, since mermaids are incredibly beautiful, they often enter into strategic marriages with other races. The tragic part is when they marry and live far from the ocean, most fall ill with deep longing and slowly die. Their mixed-blood children end up abandoned because they are welcome neither on land nor in the sea. Oscar thinks that maybe this is why Marin sings with so much raw passion, but she snaps back, saying her parents married for love and are very much alive despite everything. Oscar holds his ground. A flat no is still a no. He warns that if she insists, her chances of dying are extremely high, and the audience will also be in danger. But Marin promises everyone will be safe because there is a protective artifact installed in the seats. Marin insists she will not give up on the show even if she dies for it. Evelyn gets highly irritated by her stubbornness. Marin reminds her this performance has been her goal for 3 years, and that she endured all kinds of prejudice with zero support because of it. Oscar then asks why she wants to do this performance so desperately. Marin explains that 4 years ago her father was diagnosed with that fatal longing for the sea. The doctor gave him 5 years to live, and now only 1 remains. Everyone knows this disease has no cure, but a legendary potion is said to be able to heal anyone. She needs to get this elixir within a year, and that is why she cannot give up on the performance at the Domo Bon, no matter what. Evelyn adds that if Marin completes this show, she earns the right to sing for the Emperor and receive just a single drop of the elixir as her reward. Oscar says he understands the situation, but he needs to know if this medicine can actually cure the disease. He asks if she really planned this for 4 whole years. Marin softly answers that the only thing she does better than anyone is sing. It was her only path forward. Oscar realizes her parents must mean everything to her. He never had a family himself and has no idea what that bond feels like since he grew up alone on the streets. Still, he starts to think that if a father is anything like his own master, he would absolutely do whatever it takes to save him. So when it comes down to it, he actually understands her desperate situation better than anyone else. Feeling resolved, he stands up and asks if they can finally go inside the Domo Baron. Evelyn nods they are in, but Oscar warns that before anything else, he has to make sure the audience will be completely safe. If the security meets his standards, then Marin should have no regrets about wanting to step on that stage, even if it might cost her life. They need to move now so he can inspect every inch of the place. Meanwhile, Ara swirls a glass of wine and asks if Marin has canceled the concert yet. Ara admits she knew the girl was incredibly stubborn, but she never imagined it would go quite this far. She finds it almost cruel that she insists on singing, even at the cost of her life. Her secretary then chimes in with a rumor. Apparently, Marin left her hotel with a strange man, but she does not think it is a scandal since the guy seemed more like a quiet bodyguard. Ara finds this highly suspicious since she personally blocked Marin from contacting any mercenary agency. She demands to know where this mysterious protector came from and orders his skills to be thoroughly tested. Her assistant nods, promising to handle the matter. Meanwhile, back at the Domo Baron, Oscar is already up on stage, handing out sharp instructions to Marin. They are walking right into a trap. Ara's secretary sends 2 of her best men to the venue. After inspecting the stage, Oscar decides the defense artifact is absolutely flawless and officially accepts the job. Now they just need to sign the contract. Back at the hotel, and Evelyn says everything is ready. Oscar asks if that quick walkthrough was his only duty for now. Evelyn smiles and says yes, meaning he is free until the day of the show. Outside, Oscar notes that Marin looks like an angel. She blushes and thanks him, but he instantly kills the romantic mood, saying he only wants to earn his massive paycheck. Right then, his sharp senses pick up 2 hostile presences nearby. Without hesitating, he points his finger and fires a silent wind Projectile, the concentrated air punches through the skulls of the two hidden assassins. With incredible ease, just like that, he turns around and keeps walking as if nothing happened. After all, why worry his client over some pests? He stays focused. Meanwhile, Ara asks her secretary if the men succeeded or if they are dead. The secretary nods. They are dead. Ara realizes Marin found a seriously capable bodyguard, especially since the report shows absolutely no signs of any struggle. Instead, both men had bullet holes in their foreheads. Ara absorbs this news. Her expression growing serious, she immediately orders her personal car prepared. Determined to meet this bodyguard face to face, after all, she wants to hire him. Meanwhile, over at the Grand Baron Hotel, Marin sits in a private dining room and asks if all this is not a bit too much. The bill is on her, but Oscar notices that Marin's entire personality flips the second they are finally alone. He warns her to watch her words outside. Even this room was bugged. Every single bug was disabled upon arrival, but she still needs to stay vigilant. The young assistant remarks that their recordings were almost exposed, while Evelyn notes, Marin seems much more relaxed now thanks to him. She sighs, asking if he liked those famous Yan Dynasty dumplings. Oscar replies that it was great to eat them again. After so long, though secretly, he remembers getting sick of them during the war. Marin admits she thought all tower mages were broke, but apparently that is not true for him. Right then, the restaurant manager knocks and steps inside the room. Marin politely compliments the food, saying the dishes taste as amazing as they always do. Suddenly, Ara's sharp voice interrupts, declaring it is wonderful to see them eating so well. After all, she already paid for their entire meal in advance. Confused, Marin asks if this room is supposed to be private, but the manager explains that Miss Ara claimed they were close friends and simply wanted to say hello. The manager then excuses himself, wishing them a pleasant dinner together. Oscar silently notes that while both women are famous vocalists, Ara operates on an entirely different level. Seeing this, Marin decides to leave, grumbling that she has lost her appetite, but Ara snaps, ordering her to leave the bodyguard behind, claiming she will easily convince him to resign from his current job. Ara turns to Oscar, offering him a sweet deal to cancel his contract with Marin and join her team instead, promising to cover the cancellation fee and pay 10 times more. Marin shouts that Oscar will never fall for such a cheap trick, but to her utter shock, Oscar smoothly replies that the offer sounds absolutely fantastic. She is stunned by his sudden shift. Oscar mentions his current salary is 1 million sinos, and he loves her proposal, but then adds his transfer fee is actually 10 million. He casually asks if she can cover that massive sum. Ara immediately gets irritated, accusing him of playing games, but Oscar simply pretends to be clueless about her anger. She calls him a cheeky bastard before adjusting her glasses and demanding his real name. Oscar introduces himself under his cover name, Killian Rockwood. Ara concludes he is just an amateur for revealing his real identity so easily on the job, adding that she looks forward to seeing his future. As she turns to leave, Oscar replies that works for him, since he has always preferred being right in the center of the action. In the corner of her office, Ara huffs, seething with rage. She screams at her secretary to get the Wooduk brothers on the line, but one of them suddenly appears and says, there is no need. It is the older brother, Wu Jin, who reveals he has been tracking both targets since early this morning. Ara demands to know how he got in, and Wu Jin explains that his boss provided an ID badge. He adds that his brother Du is already moving toward their main headquarters. Ara immediately presses a button, announcing that their original plan has changed. Wu Jin is confused, since he thought his only job was to eliminate the manager when the concert begins, preventing the star from performing, but she coldly replies there is now one more target who must die, a cocky bodyguard named Killian Rockwood who needs to suffer the most painful death possible. She then demands an update on their preparations. Wu Jin explains he will infiltrate the production staff tomorrow, while Du slips in on the very same day as part of the lighting crew. Ara declares everything is ready, telling him to contact her for any extra resources. She mutters, furious that anyone dared to look down on her in this city, swearing she will show them the heavy price of such disrespect. Oscar hears this entire conversation. Leaving some mana behind was a smart move. Yet he is still quite surprised that Wu Jin suspected absolutely nothing. It is exactly as they say, birds listen at night, and mages listen by day. Go back to your rooms and rest up for tomorrow's big concert. Marin asks why he rejected that 10 million Sinos offer. Oscar asks if she seriously thinks he signed this entire contract just for the money. She admits she does, but he explains she wanted to save her father. That dream will become real. He never got that chance in his past. He failed to protect his own master, and it remains one of his deepest regrets. To avoid that heavy regret again, they have to try everything. Marin looks away, still skeptical, but she thanks him anyway. She gets up and leaves. The very next morning, the massive concert crowd finally gathers. Fans flood the massive dome. Inside, the cleaning crew is rushing around. They are wondering where the part-timer went. He is hiding in a restroom. It is Wu Jin, currently hiding in the restroom, and he knows it is time to move. He wasted a whole day waiting around in a filthy toilet like this. Now he has to head up to meet Dao in room 403. If it were not for that 5 million Sino contract, he would never bother with this. He figures Dao is already in uniform, wondering what it looks like. Suddenly, he sees Oscar washing his hands right in front of him. Talk about worst-case scenarios. Now he must decide if he should strike him down right here. Reports say Killian Rockwood is highly skilled in close combat. He is on the same level as Wu Jin, so this will be extremely difficult, safer to double team. If he messes up alone, the entire mission goes straight to hell. Suddenly, Oscar stares at his own hands, noting the calluses on his guest. The fingers have rough calluses, but the palms do not, which clearly points to concealed weapons. He bluntly asks if he is an assassin. Wu Jin is shocked. Knowing his cover is completely blown, his best option now is to flee and regroup with Dao. But Oscar hurls a bar of soap at him, calling out his brief hesitation. That pause confirms everything. Wu Jin cannot dodge, so he readies his needles. He unleashes his needles, but the soap still smashes heavily into his arm. He quickly realizes this was no ordinary soap. It was a dense block of solid mana. A great defense, but he gladly trades a shoulder for his target's life. Mages from the 4 great towers cannot escape this poison. The needles work. Oscar collapses, paralyzed. Wu Jin finally takes a deep, relieved breath. It actually worked. To be completely honest, the guy does not seem that skilled in close combat. He behaves like a total rookie who only has a bit of experience. But just as a precaution, it is best to finish him off quickly as he draws his knife. He presses the blade against Oscar's throat, but it suddenly halts. The metal simply will not go in. He desperately looks for what is blocking it. And here is the twist. He suddenly hears the sound of wind, realizing those needles were a fake. But it is already too late. Oscar points a pistol at him. Oscar mocks him for being so slow. The panicked assassin demands to know how. He calmly explains that he enveloped his entire body in a wind barrier. The assassin insists this is completely impossible, but Oscar fires, proving him wrong with a clean shot. In the distance, the concert crowd roars. The show is finally about to start. Moments later, the stage lights up. The fans erupt when Marin steps out. She begins to sing, but backstage, Du realizes his brother is missing. Panic sets in. Did something go wrong? Then he spots footprints. They belong to his brother, Wu Jin, but something makes no sense. Why would he delay like this? Even worse, the trail tells a different story. The prince go right past the room. He told Wu Jin 1,000 times it was room 407. It hits him like a truck. The person who walked past was not his brother. He turns to find Oscar standing there, so this is where the rat was hiding. Du asks if he really had the nerve to copy his brother's gate. Oscar chuckles. It was the least he could do after blowing Wu Jin's head off. Du shrugs it off. At least Wu Jin did not suffer. He knew this day would come. But it still stings. This was supposed to be their very last job. Oscar finds this calm reaction pretty unsettling. How can Du be so completely unfazed? He asks if they actually plan to retire. Du sneers no, he was just hired. This is perfect, a clash of elite assassins, but Du just scoffs. He tells Oscar that the White Tower is nowhere near the top. Oscar vows that changes today. Du sighs, you clearly have no idea what being the best actually means. To stand at the peak, he says, you need to be at least this strong. With that, he releases his mana. Oscar senses it immediately. This isn't physical weapons. It is condensed poisonous chi. Du summons a massive toxic sphere from behind his back. He launches it upward, easily melting through the concrete roof as a warning. Imagine what this would do to a human body. Suddenly, the sphere flies at Oscar. Oscar sidesteps the attack effortlessly. Du warns him that a single scratch means death. Oscar knows that well enough, but to him, a trick like this is useless. It makes no difference to his defense. Du wonders if he is somehow immune. Oscar smiles. He explains that he has actually enveloped his entire body in mana. The energy completely seals out the surrounding atmosphere, keeping the poison away. He literally manufactures oxygen inside his own body to breathe. Now that is insane. He throws Du's words back at him. This is what it means to be the best. Du chuckles. No wonder his idiot brother couldn't handle this guy. Suddenly, 4 more toxic spheres condense. Du fires them all at once. Oscar uses raw burst speed to weave through the deadly barrage. Du is stunned. There is no way this guy is just a level 4. In a flash, Oscar teleports behind him, pressing a pistol directly against Du's neck. He pulls the trigger, but the poison spheres quickly intercept the shot. Du sighs, admitting that was actually a pretty close call. Oscar watches in disbelief as his bullet literally melts in the poison chi. So this is how his useless brother got caught off guard. Du grabs Oscar by the collar and drives a brutal kick into his ribs. The impact launches Oscar backward, shattering the window glass. He falls stories down, crashing heavily onto the cold pavement below. Groaning in agony, Oscar struggles to move. Du peers down, mocking him. That had to hurt. Luckily for them, the cheering crowd didn't notice a thing. Oscar groans that it doesn't matter, raising his weapon, but Du issues a warning. He warns Oscar that his arm is broken and the fight is done, but Oscar refuses to yield. Instead, he fires 2 bullets at Doko. Doko just laughs, repeating that it is completely useless. He blocks the shots with his poison. Oscar instantly realizes this venom is strong enough to melt. Not just the bullets, but his entire gun. Doko declares that the match is finally over and tells him it is time to say goodbye. But wait, everything shifts. Right then, Marin appears on stage, shouting for her massive crowd of fans to make some noise. Oscar smiles, realizing she actually remembered their plan. He immediately unleashes his sound prison technique. He targets Doko, who laughs off the trick, confidently thinking it will not do a thing. But the massive sound waves slam directly into his brain, sending Doko stumbling backward. Oscar has to admit, this guy is incredibly tough. After all, the roaring voices of thousands are crashing down on his mind like heavy thunder. Those concentrated sound waves are causing sheer internal chaos, yet Doko still manages to shoot. He flings his poison forward, but his aim is completely off after being deafened by the noise. Oscar raises his air pistol and asks if he is hurting yet. He promises to make this quick, blasting Doko with a pressurized wind projectile right. In the chest, Doko collapses to the ground, completely defeated. Oscar finally collapses to rest. He lets out a breath, relieved that Marin came through. He recalls their rehearsal night. That night, he told her they only needed to practice one specific cue. If she heard 2 gunshots, she had to launch the fireworks and get the crowd screaming. He assured her that noise would be plenty, and now he is glad he prepared. In the end, the sudden fireworks and deafening cheers did the trick. Honestly, this was one of the cleanest jobs he had pulled off in his career. 3 days later, Marin asks if he is really okay to be walking around already. Oscar nods. He points out she hired a high priest to heal him. She admits she would feel terribly guilty if he had died. He quietly thinks that his injuries were not even that serious. Evelyn is also present to settle the bill, delivering the final total. It comes out to 1 million bells, plus an extra 100,000 as a bonus. Oscar tells Marin this success was only possible because of her incredible grit. He promises her that her father will recover soon. Marin then asks if he plans to stay in the city, and Oscar confirms he still has some unfinished business to resolve. She warns him to watch his back, as Arite must be absolutely furious. Nobody knows what she might do. Before leaving, she asks if he is really going to hide his real identity until the end. Oscar is genuinely surprised she caught on. He plays dumb, pretending he has no idea, but Marin smiles and says she knew. The whole time, those colored contact lenses gave him away instantly. Oscar asks why she trusted him anyway, and the pop star flashes a warm smile. She explains that his expression when hearing about her father felt like looking straight into a mirror. That is why she bet everything on him without hesitation. Oscar tells her she should not have risked her life, then finally reveals his real name, Oscar Crushen. Marin instantly recognizes him as the legendary genius from the White Tower who developed the famous cure for the Cadena flu. She mentions reading about him in the news, adding he seems surprisingly normal for a genius. Oscar chuckles, pointing out that offstage, she also seems like a regular person. But on stage, she is the brightest star of all. Marin giggles, standing up. She tells him he sure is smooth, thanking him for being the best bodyguard ever. She shakes Oscar's hand. Meanwhile, in a hotel over in Bonn, a young messenger arrives. He enters the room to deliver urgent news, and his senior tells him to begin. Well, the mage reports that the older brother of their expected rookie is dead. Worst part, Duko was right there with him and met the same fate. The sorceress snaps, furiously asking if he has any more terrible news to invent. The mage begs her not to take her anger out on him. After all, the killer was her own brother, Killian, an elite bodyguard. He was hired by their rivals. The mage then reveals Killian's picture. But she does not recognize him at all, claiming his face has changed. She demands to see him in person. Meanwhile, Kaga Rockwood harbors deep doubts. Is this mysterious stranger actually posing as her brother? Meanwhile, at the Sweet family mansion, the patriarch Mark expects their retreat. His secretary agrees, noting how they act like they own the entire city. Simply because of their old ties to the mayor, but Mark cuts him off. No time for gossip, the secretary shifts back to their current plan. Apparently Buzz's idiot son failed to break the password magic, but his sheer stupidity ended up helping them uncover secret documents. He even prepared some flashy fireworks. The patriarch changes the subject, remembering the punk who made his daughter cry. The secretary confirms the culprits are the famous diva, Marin Maria and Killian. However, the patriarch quickly warns him to leave the diva completely alone. She has the emperor's direct protection, so they must track Killian instead. He wonders aloud how anyone dares to mess with his beloved daughter. And on top of that, with the legendary Purple Brigade's skilled tattooist. He guarantees they will make this arrogant fool regret it bitterly. But get this, while threats loom, Oscar is calmly having tea with Killian. Killian thanks him for completing the mission, saying his body feels absolutely perfect. He insists Oscar keep the commission fee, as forest warriors do not steal. They never steal the accomplishments of others. Killian then asks where he is headed. Oscar jokingly asks if Killian plans to drag him to the White Tower. Killian laughs, there is no need, considering Oscar's superior talent. He reassures him, and Oscar finally reveals he is heading out. He is going to the Blood Tower branch in Ban to search for someone. Killian warns him to be extremely careful because Arasut is hunting him. Oscar admits that, in that case, he should probably drop his other job. They need someone to analyze encrypted data for 500,000 Sinos. But risking his life for a quick payout, just not worth it. He asks if Killian can return to the tower in his place instead. Killian is genuinely surprised to hear him speak in such a friendly way. He laughs, guessing something major changed while he was gone. He would love to join him, but he must stay in Bonn first. Oscar asks what he plans to do there. Killian drops a massive bombshell. He needs to capture the greatest traitor in the forest tribe's history. He is hunting down the absolute worst traitor in their tribe's entire history. Rumor has it this dangerous traitor is hiding out in this very city. Oscar realizes this entire situation is far more dangerous than he ever anticipated. Killian corners the traitor and places a hand over his own chest. He points straight at Killian, promising they will meet again at the White Tower soon. Utterly confused, Killian demands to know how he learns their tribe's secret greeting. Oscar silently cringes, realizing just how awful his younger self must have acted. He asks if Killian plans to finish the salute. Respectfully, the warrior also presses a hand to his chest, bidding him farewell until they meet at that legendary tower. Walking through the busy streets later, Oscar realizes that visiting the Blood Tower is an incredibly massive gamble. What if Edna is hiding? That place can track absolutely anyone with just a tiny blood sample, even a formidable demon, but can they actually locate a dragon that wants to stay hidden? Suddenly, the magical energy in the air shifts violently. Oscar whips around instantly. Why on earth is he sensing the presence of a level 7 powerhouse? Oscar realizes that a monstrous force is locking its gaze directly onto him. It is Kara wearing a sly smirk. Oscar has absolutely no clue what is happening. Just then a car sweeps past, cutting off his line of sight for a second. Once the vehicle passes, Kara is completely gone. He stands there, totally baffled. Meanwhile, another mage remarks that Kara let Oscar off way too easily back there. She should have collected his debt, regardless of his friendship with Killian. Kara scoffs, saying it was a waste of time since a weakling like him died instantly. She brushes it aside, asking the mage if he could track her location right now. Specifically, could he find her if she completely masked her presence? The mage shakes his head. He admits it would be practically impossible. Nobody on this entire continent is capable of pulling off a feat like that. Yet Kara knows she locked eyes with him. It was not just an illusion. She asks about this mysterious guy. The mage explains that Oscar was a genius. The absolute top prodigy of the entire White Tower. Kara is intrigued. She gets pretty excited to see what he will pull off next. Meanwhile, Oscar finally arrives safely at his secret destination. He steps into the Blood Tower branch in Bonn. The receptionist greets him warmly. Oscar tells her he is searching for someone. She asks if he has a blood sample. She leads him to a private room to deposit the sample into a small glass vial. Once alone, Oscar shuts the door and starts analyzing Edna's magical signature. He then bites his finger to draw a fresh drop of his own blood. He recalls Edna mentioning that her artificial dragon blood came from him. If he manipulates his own blood structure using her magical data, they can track her. Even without the unique properties of real dragon blood, it should work. He carefully drips his altered blood into the vial and steps out. Suddenly, the polite receptionist stops him right before he can walk out. She explains that he cannot just walk away without choosing a payment plan. Oscar is totally shocked. Wait, did she actually just ask him to pay? She nods, checking the prices. Oscar sighs and requests the premium plan. He mutters that this service used to be totally free for some people. The lady scoffs, telling him their services have absolutely never been free. Oscar counters, stating that the master of the White Tower gets it for free. She asks if he works there. Oscar immediately plays it cool and denies it. She mentions her relief about his lack of ties to the tower. There is a strict rule in play. A rule that slaps anyone from there with an extra 30% charge. The former tower master, Oscar Sage, used their premium plan for free 108 times. He almost ruined the Blood Tower. Today, the elders still grind their teeth at his name. They claim he was far worse than the rumors. Luckily, the royal family stepped in. If they had not bailated him out after the war, this place would be completely gone. All free perks for tower masters and royalty were permanently cancelled because of his greed. Hearing this, Oscar starts sweating bullets. He quickly asks what this special plan actually costs. 1.5 million bells, that is the price she calmly drops on him. Desperate, he asks to pay in installments, offering 1 million up front. He promises the rest in a few days. The receptionist agrees with a sharp warning. If he fails to clear the tab, he gets absolutely no results and 0 refunds. He just needs to sign the contract, and they will start working immediately. The results will take 1 to 3 days. Oscar signs it without a single hesitation. Suddenly, the door swings open. Oscar stares in shock. Let's see where this leads. Next thing we know, Oscar is pounding on Killian's door. Killian opens up, asking what is wrong. Oscar is completely out of breath, panting hard. He gasps out that he wants to take that commission Killian talked about earlier. Cash is tight, so they head straight to the Hoover family estate. Oscar mentions he heard the client is actually the son of Barron's previous mayor. He wants the full story before they walk in, wondering if they are too late. Killian reassures him they have been desperately trying to recruit someone for a while now. But the requirements are so incredibly strict that nobody could pass the test. Magical encryption, Oscar figures that is the issue. Exactly, Killian says, but first he needs to fill him in on the late mayor. Buzz Hoover was a man who truly wanted to clean up the city of Barron. Beneath the flash, citizens drowned in absolute despair. The greedy, corrupt corporations did not just look away, they actively fed the flames. Oscar notes that such a dark cycle must have made those elites filthy rich. Killian nods. That was exactly the corrupt empire Buzz vowed to tear down. He launched an all-out war against the drug syndicates, and it actually worked. Illegal smuggling plummeted by 86%, but right in the middle of his triumph, Buzz died. His death came right before opening the center. Highly suspicious, Oscar is definitely not buying it. Maybe the cartels did it, or some powerful addict. Supposedly, someone hired the infamous Purple Brigade to do it. The truth remains completely buried. But what needs decoding? Killian explains the target. Secure data locked away with magic before he died. These files likely hold the identity of his killer. Suddenly, Oscar remembers Ada. Asking about the Sweet family, Killian says Marco is safe. Marco was the mayor's biggest ally, fighting tooth and nail against the cartels. That fierce loyalty won him the public's heart, making him the favorite for mayor. Oscar starts to believe that Ada's father might actually be a decent man. Right then, the heavy door behind them creaks open, revealing a young child. The young boy asks if they are the White Tower mages, introducing himself as Jake Hoover. The youngest son of the family, Oscar introduces himself as Oscar Crushen. Level 3 and introduces Killian Raqua, a level 4. Jake recognizes that name and asks if he was Marin Maria's bodyguard. The kid gets super excited, saying he is the rising star of the White Tower who beat the Wadok brothers. He can barely believe someone so awesome actually showed up here. Jake asks if Oscar knows why he wanted to hire mages in the first place. Meanwhile, Oscar spots a weird look on Killian's face. He quickly realizes Jake thinks Killian is the guy in charge. But the choice is actually Oscar's, so he replies that he heard the kid wanted someone to decipher some secret data. Jake nods and confirms it, explaining that his father left behind some absolutely shocking information, but so far nobody has been able to solve the mystery. Oscar asks if he believes his father's death is connected to this data. Jake confirms that he is absolutely sure of it. Oscar then asks why he feels so certain. Kid explains that after his father passed away, he reached out to several famous mages for deciphering codes, but some highly unusual things happened to all of them on their way to Bon. One fell from his horse, another's car exploded, then a bridge collapsed just as one was crossing, while others got ambushed by bandits. Not a single soul survived. Talk about a massive red flag. He is absolutely sure someone is blocking this information from ever getting out. Oscar agrees that the whole situation sounds incredibly suspicious. Jake explains that because of this danger, he has a strict hiring process to follow. He shows them a sealed scroll from the sacred El Terrara order. Oscar recognizes it immediately and notes that it is extremely rare. He realizes it is a type of deadly contract that takes your life if you break its clauses, and despite how serious this is, the kid has the guts to use it. Oscar understands that the boy is doing his absolute best as the family heir. Oscar then says that before signing, he needs to confirm one thing: did everyone else go through this exact same process? Jake assures him that he handled the security himself, so there is zero reason to suspect anyone, but Oscar wants to judge the situation for himself. He demands to see the scrolls that everyone else signed. One of the guards gets furious and barks, asking how a mere level 3 dares to give them orders, but Oscar instantly responds with a heavy spell. The loudmouth is instantly paralyzed, completely unable to move a single muscle. Oscar realizes that by manipulating the wind currents, he can easily trick everyone into thinking his power belongs to a high-tier master. Pretty clever, right? Everyone wonders how Level 3 can pull this off, but Oscar casually says it was just a simple precaution. Jake quickly steps in and tells his men to shut up. Then he rings a bell and orders the actual contracts to be brought over. Oscar sits down and begins reviewing the scrolls. Suddenly, he calls out the names Tonfrank and Cote Bari. Right then, a sudden spell strikes one of them, slamming his face hard straight into the solid wall. The traitor collapses onto the floor, and while Jake panics, Oscar demands to know who brought those scrolls. He orders them to arrest the attendant immediately because these contracts are fakes. They are just ordinary papers with zero divine power. A real magical contract would never tear this easily. Means the 2 suspects were never bound by the oath and have likely leaked information. Hearing this, a knight draws his sword to strike, but Killian moves infinitely faster. With one swift kick, he sends the weapon flying away. He leaps into the air, keeping his momentum as he shifts his kick mid-flight. The blow hits the traitor, and Killian instantly pins him to demand answers. The spy claims he knows absolutely nothing, but Oscar points out that is highly unlikely. He definitely knows what intel he leaked, forcing the man to confess his betrayal. Leaking the mercenary count and level meant a stronger enemy army was on the way. Hearing this, Jake begins to panic, desperately insisting this cannot be happening. But Oscar tells him to pull himself together, immediately laying out his price to help. 500,000 to decrypt it, plus 500,000 to hire them. Jake agrees to the terms and seals the deal. Later, they head to a secure location. Oscar compliments the hidden space, mentioning that he keeps a private hideout of his own too. The young heir is clearly pleased by the praise as he opens a heavy door. He admits no one else has ever seen this room, which holds his father's secret briefcase. Oscar immediately steps up to analyze the case using his magic. One quick scan is all it takes for him to spot something highly unusual. The briefcase is protected by heavy magic, including a triple layer of encryption. It has defensive magic and an explosion trap meant to blow up any intruders. Jake confesses he was terrified of that, asking if Oscar can actually break the lock. Oscar confidently nods, explaining that compared to military codes during the war, this is easy. He calls it complete child's play, cracking the security spells open with absolute ease. And just like that, the lock pops, but what is waiting inside will change everything. Oscar tells him to look, while Killian admits he could never have bypassed that. Tears pool in the boy's eyes as he pulls out a letter and begins to read. He quietly thanks them, but when Oscar asks about clues, Jake sadly shakes his head. The letter simply details standard corruption among local politicians and powerful corporations. That kind of greed is normal in Bonn, so murdering his father over this seems highly extreme. Oscar watches him, silently noting how his own student had to grow up far too fast. He suggests that if these documents are a dead end, they must look elsewhere for answers. That leaves only his father's personal diary, and Jake agrees to read the entries aloud. He flips to the entry from June 10th, where his father reflected on his time in office. The diary entry noted that 2 years had passed since he became the city mayor. The local papers had just called Barron the City of Drinks, which was a massive victory. Previously, everyone knew it as the City of Drugs, so this was a massive step forward. He credited this great achievement to the citizens himself and his close ally, Mark. In the remaining 2 years of his term, Bonn would become an even safer place. Then the entries skip ahead to July 2nd, noting that the drug trade still persists. Even after the war ended, smuggling never slowed down, suggesting deeper forces at play. It was no minor operation. By August, he had interrogated 100 dealers. Yet not a single one of them knew the identity of their true boss. Such scale made him suspect a powerful corporation was behind everything. Jake notes his father actually planned to discuss these worrying suspicions directly with Mark. But by August 24th, he realized to his horror that Mark was already fully aware. Devastated by the betrayal, he immediately ordered a trusted ally to tail his old friend. Oscar notices Jake growing visibly pale and gently asks if he is doing all right. He offers to take over the reading if the truth is too painful to bear. The entry on September 1st is brutal, with his father calling Mark a complete traitor. The executive of the Empire's biggest cartel, he desperately wanted to grab Mark by the collar, but he had to hold back. The citizens' future depended on his choices. Reading these words, Jake clenches his fist in pure anger. The journal entry continues with his father writing about inaugurating the center and meeting a high-ranking imperial official that same night. If everything went well, they could put an end to happy ending once and for all. It was all for a brighter future for Barron. Then Jake flips to the page for September 18th. That was the exact day his father died. He remembers Mark promising to catch the killer no matter what and carry on his legacy so no one would worry. That was how Mark put on a show, consoling him before the whole city. But the truth is Mark is the actual cartel boss. Talk about a betrayal. Jake panics, sickened by his audacity. Oscar steps in, telling the boy not to lose hope. Mark will absolutely pay for his crimes. He promises to make it happen. After all, they are elite mages from the prestigious White Tower. Killian notes that the entire situation is far worse than they imagined. Barron is about to fall to the cartel. But Oscar warns that this is no longer just a local problem for Barron. With 600,000 citizens and countless tourists, Oscar raises a chilling question. What happens if Mark gets every single one of those people hooked on drugs? Killian finishes the thought those addicted tourists would eventually return home. Once that happens, the poison will spread like wildfire across the entire kingdom. This single diary entry is the only real weapon they have against him. Killian agrees, but the real mystery is his timing, since Mark wants the next mayoral election. He cannot let the public discover the truth. He will choose a moment when the entire city is distracted, so nobody notices a thing. Oscar asks if there is an upcoming festival that fits the bill, and Jake nods immediately. He reveals that tonight, a massive festival for the public is happening downtown, complete with a massive fireworks show. Killian realizes it has to be tonight. The clock is ticking. Guys, he suggests smuggling the boy out because This conspiracy is way too massive for them to handle alone. They need reinforcements. Oscar scoffs, asking Killian if he is just being realistic. Or simply being a coward. Killian defends himself, saying he is only human. But Jake cuts in. No, he refuses to run away if he flees now. He will lose his only shot at avenging his father. He does not think another perfect opportunity like this will ever present itself. If they believe it is too risky, he will go alone and tear up their contract. Oscar looks at the boy with concern, saying those words actually hurt. There is absolutely no way they are abandoning him now. He reminds Jake that he hired them for a reason. The boy's face lights up as he thanks them. Oscar laughs, telling him to save the gratitude until they actually win, right now. They need a way to contact the outside from this mansion. Jake nods, but explains that all outgoing signals are jammed. Baron's security is too tight, proving that this tight trap was planned from the very beginning. Oscar asks if they can find a communication crystal ball around here, and Jake remembers he has one. His late father was a collector of rare items. He loved its beautiful design, so his father gifted it to him, Killian. This perfect timing feels straight out of a story. Oscar